there was a bridge in the valley that was perfectly ordinary in every way, except for the way the wind whispered differently once the sun sank behind the hills. Its stones were smooth from years of passing feet, and the ropes along the sides were frayed but steady, lined with moss in quiet patches. During the day, children skipped across, tossing pebbles into the stream below, and merchants rolled their carts along the worn boards without thought. But after sunset, the air seemed to shift. The sound of footsteps changed subtly, softening and stretching, as if the bridge had learned to breathe. Lanterns swung gently in the hands of those who dared linger. Yet, no one did linger for long. It was the sort of thing people noticed only in passing, and then forgot by morning. Perhaps the bridge itself had something to say, though nobody had asked it yet. Nobody knew why the wooden planks sometimes creaked when no one was there. Nobody knew why the ropes hummed faintly when the moon was just above the ridge. These small mysteries had quietly settled into the daily rhythm of the valley. Parents told children it was the wind. Travelers shrugged and hurried on. The bridge remained, patient and waiting, its quiet stories buried beneath moss and twilight. One evening, a girl named Ilara came to the edge of the bridge. She was 12, with soft brown hair tucked behind her ears, and eyes that lingered longer than most on small details others missed. She adjusted the strap of her satchel and stepped lightly onto the boards, listening to the subtle hum that seemed to answer her own soft footfalls. She did not pause. She walked onward, drawn by something she could not name, following the quiet invitation the bridge offered without words. The first lanterns in the village were lit, casting pools of honeyed light onto the cobblestones and riverbanks. Smoke drifted lazily from chimney tops, carrying the scent of baked bread and dried herbs. Somewhere near, an old mill turned slowly, its wheel brushing against the current with a gentle, rhythmic splash. The bridge was tucked between these familiar sights, yet it felt separate, almost forgotten, as if it had been waiting for someone like Ilara for many years. She noticed the smallest things first, a loose plank with a tiny sprig of lavender growing between the cracks, the faint pattern of an old rope not tied decades ago and left untouched, the way the water caught the lantern light and refracted it into tiny flickers on the bridge's underside. Each detail whispered a story, unhurried and patient, inviting her to notice, to linger, to touch the edges of the quiet past. As she walked, the valley deepened into twilight, and the air grew cooler, brushing against her cheeks like the soft edge of a cloth. Somewhere above, an owl's wing beat against the hush of evening, and a flock of starlings shifted in the distance, their calls soft echoes. The bridge creaked underfoot, a voice only she seemed to hear, a low, welcoming murmur. It felt alive, not in fear or danger, but in quiet memory and careful watchfulness. By the time she reached the center, she saw the first hint of an abandoned lantern, swaying slightly, long forgotten, its metal dulled and glass cloudy. The ropes nearby had been braided once with care, now loosened with age, and the boards beneath her hands held traces of moss and dust like a pale green carpet. A sudden thought brushed her mind. The bridge had been crossed by many, yet no one had cared for it in years. It was a place waiting to be remembered. Ilara knelt carefully, brushing her fingers along the rope, feeling its worn fibers, and she realized the bridge might hold more than echoes of steps and wind. Perhaps it had kept stories that needed telling, tasks that needed finishing. The small lantern, she thought, could be cleaned, polished, and relit. The ropes could be straightened, knots repaired. Each step could restore something small, tangible, and gentle to a forgotten place. From the far end, an elderly figure appeared, moving slowly along the shadowed path toward her. His robes were plain, the kind of soft brown cloth that had been patched and worn over decades. A cane tapped lightly against the boards, a rhythm as calm and measured as the flow of the river below. He smiled faintly, eyes crinkling with the memory of long past crossings. This was Naren, the keeper of old paths, the one who had tended forgotten roots and taught young ones to listen, to notice, to restore. "Good evening, Ilara," he said softly, his voice blending with the bridge's quiet hum. "I wondered if you might come tonight." There was no rush in his words, only the weightless warmth of presence. She nodded, her hands still brushing the rope, and felt a sudden, gentle connection to everything that had stood there long before her. Feet, hands, wind, water, and the patient stones themselves. Together, they began to move slowly along the bridge, examining each plank, each rope, each metal fitting. Naren demonstrated how to tie knots that would last, how to polish the lantern without chipping the glass, how to notice the subtle curves of the wood so that every step would be secure. Ilara listened carefully, her hands learning to follow, her mind settling into the rhythm of patient restorative work. There was no hurry, no expectation, only attentive care. The river below whispered as if encouraging them. Each ripple seemed to reflect the soft lantern light, the shimmer of moss, the dust motes dancing in the evening air. She learned to follow the currents of wind along the ropes, to feel the slight give in the planks, to move gently so as not to disturb the fragile balance. The bridge became a companion, not an obstacle, and she understood the joy of noticing what had been long forgotten. Night deepened, the moon rose, and the valley around them softened into a muted silver. Ilara and Naren paused in the center, looking at the bridge's span. Small repairs made, lanterns dusted, ropes secured. There was a quiet satisfaction, a calm acknowledgement of what had been restored. The bridge no longer felt abandoned. It had begun to breathe again under their careful touch, alive in the slow, steady rhythm of restoration. "Sometimes," Naren whispered, "the smallest hands, guided by patience, can revive the oldest places." He nodded toward her, and she felt the weight of those words settle softly in her chest. The bridge hummed beneath her feet, not with danger, but with quiet memory, and the gentle assurance of usefulness returned. The night held them in its calm embrace, and the valley seemed to exhale, as though it too had waited for this quiet act. Ilara took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, the gentle hum of the bridge beneath, the river's soft murmuring. She realized that being present, noticing the small details, restoring what had been neglected, was a kind of story all on its own, a slow, deliberate tale of care and quiet love. The bridge, the river, the ropes, the lanterns, and even the moss had become part of that story, and she, small and patient, had become part of it too. The night deepened around Ilara and Naren as they moved slowly along the bridge, lanterns casting soft, honeyed light onto the moss-flecked planks. Every step seemed measured, almost ceremonious, as if the bridge itself had been waiting for hands that would move with care instead of haste. The hum of the ropes mingled with the gentle rush of the river below, creating a subtle rhythm that settled into their bones. Ilara noticed how the worn stones beneath the ropes held the memory of countless footsteps, each telling stories she could only imagine. She knelt beside one plank that had a narrow split running along its grain, tracing it gently with her fingers. "Can we fix this one?" she asked softly. Naren's eyes crinkled in a slow, approving smile. "Yes, but we must go slowly," he said. "It's not only the wood we mend, but the memory of its crossings. Treat it with patience, and it will hold again." Ilara nodded, the quiet weight of his words settling over her like a blanket. He handed her a small bundle of tools, a soft brush, a wooden mallet, and a handful of nails wrapped in linen. Each was worn from decades of use, edges rounded smooth, handles darkened by hands that had tended many forgotten places. She selected a nail and tapped it lightly into the plank, listening to the soft echo against the river. She tapped again, slower this time, feeling the wood settle beneath her touch. Naren moved beside her, guiding her hands lightly, demonstrating the rhythm of care that came not from force, but from observation. They continued along the bridge, section by section, pausing to restore ropes that had loosened, dust lanterns that had dulled to a pale gray, and sweep away moss that had grown thick and soft in hidden corners. Each action was deliberate, measured, like breathing. Ilara felt herself slowing, her heart settling into the cadence of the bridge. Even the night seemed to bend around them, a gentle presence rather than a void. The moon, high above, cast silver trails across the water, illuminating patterns she had never noticed. The tiny swirls of current around stones, the glimmer of dew on moss, the subtle dance of insects in the lantern light. A section of rope, frayed near a knotted end, caught her attention. She crouched down, tracing the fibers and feeling the texture, noticing the pattern of each twist. Naren knelt beside her, whispering softly, "Ropes are like paths. They can fray, they can loosen, but a careful hand can guide them back into strength." She nodded, taking his advice to heart. She tied the knot slowly, watching it settle into place. When she finished, the rope hummed softly, as if pleased to be mended. She pressed a hand to it, feeling the bridge respond, a subtle vibration of welcome beneath her fingers. As they worked, small sounds revealed themselves. The river's current whispered secrets through the arches of the bridge. Leaves brushed gently against the ropes when the wind shifted. Somewhere, an owl rotated its head with a soft rustle, studying them in silence. The subtle harmony of night settled over Ilara like a quiet song, one that only those who moved slowly and noticed carefully could hear. Each repaired plank and rope seemed to hum with its own memory, reminding her that even forgotten things carried stories worth tending. Naren paused, placing a hand on a weathered post. "This bridge has seen more than any of us," he said, his voice low, almost blending with the night air. It has carried travelers, goods, messages, and sometimes just the weight of silence. Each plank, each rope remembers. If we listen, it will teach us how to move with care. Ilara pressed her hand to the same post, feeling the cool wood beneath her palm. The texture of decades pressed into its surface. She understood, without needing words, the importance of attention and gentleness. They reached the middle of the bridge again, where the largest lantern hung from a curved hook, long neglected and dulled. Ilara carefully brushed away years of dust, revealing the soft amber glow of glass beneath. Naren showed her how to replace the wick and oil the lantern gently so that it would burn evenly, casting a calm, steady light. When she finally lit it, the lantern's glow spread across the bridge, illuminating the worn ropes, mossy planks, and the quiet current below. It was a small triumph, simple and unhurried, but it felt like breathing new life into something long forgotten. As they continued, they came to a series of boards near the far end that had begun to warp from water and weather. Naren demonstrated how to lift and straighten each one, pressing it carefully into place and securing it with nails that glinted in the lantern light. Ilara followed his hands, learning the subtle pressure needed to keep the board stable without cracking them. She discovered how the smallest adjustments could bring balance to the entire span, and how patient, deliberate effort could restore not only structure, but also calm. The quiet rhythm of their work was occasionally punctuated by soft observations. Ilara noted the way the river reflected the moonlight differently on each side of the bridge, the tiny spiral patterns of moss at the base of posts, the delicate play of shadows from lanterns swinging gently in the night breeze. Each observation was part of their task, each noticing part of the restoration. Naren encouraged her to speak softly about what she saw, and she began to describe the textures, the patterns, and the subtle movements around them. Her words seemed to settle into the bridge itself, another layer of careful attention added to its memory. At one point, she paused to rest her hands and looked over the edge of the bridge. The river shimmered silver beneath the moonlight, smooth except where small rocks broke the surface, sending soft ripples outward. Somewhere upstream, water lapped against stones with a muted, steady rhythm, a sound so gentle it felt like a heartbeat beneath the night. Ilara took a slow breath, feeling the calm of the valley settle into her chest. Naren sat beside her, leaning lightly on his cane, silent but present, letting her absorb the peace of the place. The night wore on, and their work continued in a soft, deliberate pattern. Each repaired section of the bridge seemed to respond, settling into its renewed place. Moss that had been brushed aside revealed small carvings from past travelers, initials, dates, and tiny, careful sketches that spoke of quiet lives long past. Ilara traced her fingers over one, noticing the care with which it had been etched. She felt a connection, fragile but meaningful, to everyone who had ever crossed this bridge. Eventually, they reached the last segment, nearest the far bank, where the boards had grown uneven and the ropes nearly loosened entirely. Naren gestured toward her. "This last stretch is yours," he said. "Take your time, listen to the bridge, and let it guide you." Ilara knelt, pressing her hands to the cool, worn wood, and began the slow, careful work of lifting, straightening, and securing each plank. She tied knots, brushed moss aside, and finally polished the rope until it gleamed softly under the lantern light. Each action was quiet, deliberate, and full of presence. By the time she finished, the entire bridge felt renewed. It was not new, but it was strong again, alive in the gentle rhythm of careful restoration. The lanterns glowed softly, ropes hummed faintly, and planks held firmly beneath their hands. Ilara stood at the center, breathing slowly, feeling the calm of the night settle around her like a soft cloak. Naren came to stand beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Well done," he whispered. "The bridge remembers you now, and it will carry others safely once more." Ilara let the quiet wash over her, the rhythm of river, bridge, and night mingling with her own steady breathing. She realized that restoring the bridge was not only about mending wood and rope, but about learning patience, observation, and care. The bridge had taught her something small, gentle, and lasting, a story without words, a rhythm without urgency, a presence without demand. She leaned lightly against a post, watching the river shimmer beneath the silver moonlight. Somewhere far upstream, the current carried the soft sound of water over stones, and somewhere nearby, an owl's wings stirred the air silently. The bridge beneath her hummed quietly in approval, and the valley seemed to exhale, a slow and steady sigh of satisfaction. Ilara's heart mirrored that calm, steady rhythm, and she knew she could linger here, learning, noticing, and restoring as long as the night allowed. The moon had climbed higher, casting a soft silver sheen across the valley, and the bridge now seemed almost to glow beneath its light. Ilara moved slowly, testing each plank with her feet as if learning to speak the language of the bridge itself. Every step was deliberate, each creak and hum a note in the quiet symphony that surrounded them. Naren followed, leaning lightly on his cane, his presence steady and unhurried, a reminder that patience was as vital as skill. They paused near the midpoint, where the moss had been particularly thick and stubborn. Ilara knelt, brushing it aside with gentle sweeps of her hand, revealing the subtle patterns in the worn wood beneath. She noticed faint carvings of initials and tiny, careful sketches that travelers long ago had etched into the planks, small, silent signatures of lives that had passed this way. The bridge seemed to breathe under her hands, alive not with sound but with memory, and she felt an unexpected comfort in the continuity of it. Naren spoke softly, his voice barely above the whisper of the river. "Every bridge carries more than travelers," he said. "It carries moments. It holds memories, some forgotten, some waiting to be remembered." Ilara nodded, understanding that their restoration work was not merely physical. It was also a delicate act of acknowledging history, of honoring those who had walked here before. Her fingers traced the carvings lightly, and she imagined the hands that had left them, gentle and small like hers, long ago. As she worked on the ropes, she became aware of the subtle movements of the night around her. Leaves stirred faintly in the breeze, brushing against ropes and posts with a soft, whispering sound. Somewhere upstream, water lapped against stones, steady and calm, reflecting the moonlight in tiny silver patterns. Insects flickered near the lanterns, moving almost invisibly in the pale glow. Every detail felt significant, part of the bridge's story, part of the rhythm of restoration they were weaving. The next section of planks had warped slightly, a consequence of rain and frost over the years. Ilara lifted each carefully, pressing and tapping gently, following Naren's instructions. He demonstrated the subtle pressure required to correct the boards without cracking them, his hands moving slowly and deliberately over the worn surfaces. She followed his example, feeling the difference between wood that resisted and wood that yielded, learning to listen with her hands. Each corrected plank brought a quiet satisfaction, a gentle acknowledgement of careful attention. A small lantern swayed in the evening breeze, its glass dulled by time. Ilara took it down and cleaned it with soft cloths, revealing the warm amber glow within. She replaced the wick and oiled it lightly, and when she lit it, the lantern cast a serene circle of light across the bridge. Shadows danced subtly along ropes and planks, flickering in tune with the gentle wind. The effect was soothing, almost meditative. She realized that light, even small and humble, could transform a place from forgotten to welcoming. Further along, they came to a section where a rope had frayed nearly to its end. Naren showed her how to braid it carefully, preserving the pattern of twists while reinforcing the fibers. Ilara worked slowly, her fingers tracing each strand, ensuring that it settled snugly and securely. When she finished, the rope hummed faintly, a soft vibration that seemed almost like gratitude. The bridge, she thought, was not simply a structure. It was a living memory, responding to care and attention in ways subtle but unmistakable. Naren gestured toward the far side of the bridge. "See that?" he asked. "A plank that seems insignificant can hold the weight of everything else. Don't overlook the small things." Ilara knelt beside it, examining the tiny imperfections, the slight cracks in the grain, the subtle unevenness. She realized that restoring it meant patience and precision, a quiet attentiveness that extended beyond physical repair into mindfulness. Every touch mattered, every knot, every sweep of the brush, a testament to care. Night deepened, and the bridge seemed to settle into itself, a gentle calm filling the span. The river below murmured steadily, its silver surface reflecting the lanterns and the moon. Ilara paused to rest her hands and look at the view. The valley stretched quietly, hills rolling softly into the distance, dotted with clusters of trees that whispered in the breeze. The stillness was profound but not empty. It was alive with subtle motion, with the faint sigh of wind, with the rhythm of water and wood and moss. She turned her attention to a small pile of old tools left by previous caretakers. Some were rusted, others worn smooth, but each bore the marks of careful hands. Ilara selected a mallet, its wood polished by years of use, and tapped lightly on a plank that had begun to sag. The sound was faint but clear, a quiet signal that the wood had shifted into stability. Naren watched, nodding, and she felt the weight of accomplishment in the simplicity of the act. Restoration was not dramatic, it was deliberate, attentive, and quietly rewarding. They continued, moving toward the final span before the far bank. The planks here were uneven, warped by years of weather, and the ropes were frayed at every knot. Ilara's hands worked methodically, lifting, pressing, tying, and smoothing. She began to notice the subtle patterns of the bridge, the way each plank leaned slightly, the direction of rope twists, the gentle curves where moss had softened edges. Each detail mattered, and attending to it brought a quiet sense of satisfaction. A soft breeze carried the scent of the river, mingling with the earthy aroma of moss and wood somewhere along the bank. A small animal rustled in the underbrush, moving quietly, almost invisible. The gentle world seemed attentive to their work, as though it, too, approved of careful attention. Elara's movements slowed further, becoming a meditation of touch, sight, and awareness. The bridge beneath her hands and feet seemed to settle with every careful adjustment, responding not only to skill but to presence. By the time they reached the last segment nearest the far bank, Elara had gained a rhythm that felt natural. She moved as if guided by the bridge itself, her hands knowing what to do without conscious thought. Naren followed silently, his presence reassuring but unobtrusive, letting her lead the final steps. Each plank secured, each rope straightened, each lantern polished and lit, it all became part of a quiet choreography, a gentle restoration of both structure and calm. The final rope was tied carefully, knots snug, ends tucked neatly away. Elara brushed her hands over the plank, feeling the warmth and texture beneath her fingers. Naren stood beside her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "It is done," he whispered. "The bridge is whole again, and you have been part of its care. Remember this feeling, the quiet attention, the patience, the gentle work of restoration." Elara nodded, letting the words settle, her chest filled with the calm satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. They lingered for a moment at the center of the bridge, watching the moonlight shimmer across the river. The lanterns cast gentle patterns of light and shadow, the ropes hummed softly in response to the night breeze, and the planks beneath their feet were steady and sound. Every detail, every small act of care contributed to the overall sense of peace. Elara realized that restoration was not just about fixing what was broken. It was about connecting to the memory of the place, honoring what had come before, and creating a quiet space for those who would follow. Slowly, they began to make their way back toward the near bank, walking with measured steps, mindful of the rhythms they had established. Each plank, each rope, each lantern was now part of a living memory, and their care had restored not only the bridge, but also a sense of continuity, of belonging, of gentle purpose. The valley around them seemed to sigh in contentment, the wind carrying a soft, approving murmur, the river reflecting silver trails across the night. By the time they reached the first lantern, Elara paused, taking in the entire span. The bridge no longer felt forgotten. It was alive with the touch of careful hands, with the hum of ropes and the glow of lanterns, with the subtle memory of all who had crossed before. She felt a quiet pride, a soft satisfaction, and a gentle understanding that small acts, done with patience and attention, could create lasting change. The night continued to unfold around them, calm and steady. Somewhere upstream, water whispered over stones, and the trees swayed lightly in the breeze. Elara breathed deeply, her mind and body settling into the rhythm of the night, the bridge, and the valley. Naren watched her quietly, a faint smile on his lips, knowing that the lessons of patience, care, and presence had been absorbed without urgency, without rush, and without need for applause. They paused one last time at the near bank, the bridge fully restored. Lanterns glowed softly, ropes were secure, planks held steady, and the gentle hum of the structure spoke of quiet completion. Ilara rested her hands lightly on the ropes, feeling the subtle vibration, the quiet acknowledgement of her effort. Naren nodded, and together they lingered in the calm, breathing in the night, the valley, and the renewed bridge beneath their feet. The first glow of dawn had not yet touched the valley, but the night had softened into a gentle gray, the shadows less dense, the lanterns now casting a mellow diffused light across the bridge. Ilara lingered at the center, listening to the subtle hum of ropes and the quiet sigh of planks beneath her hands. The bridge seemed to breathe, alive with the memory of attention and care that had been given to it over the long night. Naren stood beside her, silent and steady, the weight of his years reflected in the slow rhythm of his presence. Ilara shifted slightly, kneeling to inspect a plank that had previously resisted her careful lifting. The grain of the wood now felt smooth under her fingers, the subtle curve settled into place. She pressed her palm against it, sensing the quiet endurance of the material, the echoes of every hand that had touched it before her. Naren watched, leaning lightly on his cane, his eyes glimmering with the satisfaction of a task performed with patience. "Notice," he murmured, "how it responds when you move with care. The bridge remembers." She continued methodically, brushing away fine grains of moss along the ropes and edges of the planks. Each detail seemed magnified in the dim light, the soft texture of the rope, the slight wavering of a plank, the glimmer of moisture trapped in the wood grain. She paused to straighten a rope knot that had loosened slightly overnight. Her fingers traced the twists carefully, realigning each fiber as Naren had shown her. The rope hummed faintly under her touch, a subtle confirmation of her gentle attention. A small wind stirred through the valley, brushing against her cheeks, lifting strands of her hair, and carrying the faint scent of river water and damp earth. Ilara felt a deep, almost meditative calm settle over her as she continued along the bridge. Each movement was slow, deliberate, infused with the quiet purpose of restoration. She noticed the tiny differences between sections of rope, the subtle variations in the planks, the way light reflected differently across the bridge's span. Every detail mattered. Naren moved beside her as they approached the middle arch, where water lapped softly against the worn stone foundations. He crouched beside her, showing her how to press the boards carefully into place without stressing the grain. "See how the pressure must be just enough to encourage the wood, not force it?" he whispered. Ilara mimicked the motion, feeling the subtle shift, the small sigh of wood settling into place. She realized that restoration was not about domination, but about listening, understanding, and gentle guidance. The night deepened further, the moon retreating behind clouds, leaving only a faint silver glow that mingled with the lanterns. Ilara paused to observe the river below, noticing small fish glinting like shards of silver as they moved beneath the surface. She thought of the bridge as part of a larger rhythm, connected to the river, the valley, and the gentle pulse of life around it. Each step she had taken, Each rope she had braided, each plank she had lifted, was part of this delicate interplay. They came to a section near the far bank, where the wood had begun to warp unevenly. Elara knelt, pressing her palms to the surface, lifting and adjusting each plank carefully. Naren guided her hands subtly, showing her the minute shifts needed to correct the alignment. The process was slow, demanding attention but not pressure. The bridge responded to their care, settling gradually, quietly, as if relieved to feel the touch of attentive hands. A soft rustle reached her ears, an animal perhaps, moving in the underbrush on the far bank. The sound was unobtrusive, almost a whisper, a reminder that life persisted quietly around them. Elara smiled faintly, feeling a connection to all the small presences in the valley. The river, the trees, the moss, the insects, the distant call of birds preparing for dawn. Everything seemed to exist in a delicate balance, and she was learning how to move gently within it. The large lantern in the middle of the bridge flickered slightly, its light bouncing across the ropes and planks. Elara picked it up and adjusted the wick, ensuring that the flame burned evenly and steadily. She felt a sense of quiet satisfaction as the glow spread across the surface, illuminating small details she had almost overlooked. The faint etching of initials on a plank, the spiral pattern of moss at a post's base, the subtle curve of the ropes against the supports. Every small element contributed to the overall calm and balance of the bridge. Naren nodded approvingly. "See how small acts create harmony," he said softly. "It is not the grand gesture that matters, but the attentive hand, the careful observation, the patience to move with what is already here." Elara felt the truth of his words settle into her chest. Restoration was not just about structure or utility. It was about noticing, attending, and honoring what had been forgotten. As they continued toward the far end, she encountered a section of rope that had been frayed and neglected for years. Naren showed her how to unweave the old fibers gently and braid a new, secure section without disturbing the pattern. She followed his guidance slowly, feeling the rope respond under her fingers. When she finished, the rope hummed faintly, a soft vibration of approval, a quiet acknowledgement that care had been given and received. Elara knelt beside the final plank on the far end of the bridge, brushing away debris and smoothing the surface. Naren watched, allowing her to complete the task herself. Her hands moved deliberately, pressing and lifting, adjusting and securing. She felt the subtle pulse of the wood beneath her fingers, the hum of the ropes in response to touch, and the quiet reassurance of a structure restored to its proper balance. A small owl watched from a nearby tree, its eyes gleaming in the soft lantern light. Its presence was calm, unobtrusive, part of the gentle rhythm of night that enveloped them. The river murmured steadily below, the wind whispered through the valley, and the bridge itself seemed to settle in satisfaction beneath their hands. Every repaired rope, every straightened plank, every polished lantern contributed to the harmony of the place. Elara took a moment to rest, leaning lightly against a post. The weight of her work settled softly in her chest. She had learned to observe, to feel, to respond. She had touched the bridge with care and patience, And in doing so, the bridge had revealed its quiet stories, its subtle lessons, its gentle rhythm. Naren's presence beside her was steady and unobtrusive, a calm assurance that the slow work of restoration was complete for now, yet always ongoing. The bridge, now whole and humming with quiet life, seemed to invite them to pause. Ilara ran her hands along the ropes, feeling their subtle tension, their readiness. She pressed her palms to the planks, noting their smoothness, their stability, their gentle warmth from hours of careful touch. The valley exhaled around them, the river, the trees, the night itself folding softly into a calm, restorative embrace. Naren gestured toward the near bank, a silent suggestion that they begin to move back. But Ilara lingered for a moment. She listened to the bridge, its subtle vibrations underfoot, its faint hum through the ropes. It felt alive, not in urgency or excitement, but in quiet satisfaction, in the steady presence of what had been tended with care. She realized that the bridge would continue to carry travelers safely, its story enriched by their gentle attention. Slowly, they began their measured walk back, their steps echoing faintly in the quiet of the valley. Each plank, each rope, each lantern reflected the care they had invested, and Ilara felt a profound calm in knowing that small, deliberate acts could create lasting stability and quiet beauty. Naren's presence was a gentle reminder that restoration was not merely an action, but a way of moving through the world with patience, awareness, and respect. By the time they reached the first lantern at the near bank, the valley was bathed in the soft gray light of approaching dawn. Shadows softened, and the river's surface reflected the subtle hint of morning. Ilara paused, taking in the entire span of the bridge. Every repaired rope, every straightened plank, every polished lantern contributed to a quiet harmony, a sense of continuity and presence that could be felt but not spoken aloud. She knelt once more to press her hands against the central plank, feeling the subtle vibrations, the hum of careful restoration settling into the bridge. Naren watched silently, a faint smile touching his lips. "Well done, Ilara," he said softly. "You have learned not only to restore, but to listen, to notice, and to move with care. Remember this calm and carry it wherever you go." Ilara nodded, letting the words fold gently into her chest. The bridge, fully restored, hummed softly in approval beneath their hands and feet. The river whispered, the wind moved gently through the valley, and the first hints of morning light filtered across the scene. Every detail, the ropes, planks, lanterns, moss, and etchings, spoke of care and presence, of deliberate attention paid over hours of quiet labor. Ilara understood that restoration was as much about presence as it was about action, and that the bridge had become a living lesson in patience, observation, and gentle persistence. Dawn had begun to brush the valley with soft streaks of pale gold, turning the silver gray of night into muted, gentle light. Ilara stood at the center of the bridge, her hands resting on the smooth ropes, feeling the subtle vibration beneath her palms. Every plank, every knot, every polished lantern glimmered faintly in the early morning light. The bridge no longer felt abandoned. It carried the weight of memories, care, and attention, infused with a quiet vitality that had been absent for decades. Naren moved slowly along her side, his cane tapping softly against the worn wood, a gentle accompaniment to the soft rhythm of the river below. "It is remarkable," he said, his voice low, "how quiet attention can restore more than a bridge. It restores a sense of place, a connection to what came before, and the patience to move carefully in the world." Elara nodded, letting the calm of the morning settle around her like a warm shawl. She could feel the valley exhaling, as if approving the night's work, as if the river itself had been waiting for their careful presence. She knelt to inspect the far end of the bridge, where the planks had been the most warped and fragile. Each had been lifted, pressed, and secured. The ropes, now tight and steady, hummed faintly under her fingers. Lanterns, polished and lit, glowed with a gentle amber light that softened the shadows along the bridge's arches. She traced the grain of each plank with her fingertips, feeling the subtle curves and dips, the textures that told stories of countless travelers who had passed before. The bridge was alive again, but not in a way that shouted for attention. It thrummed with quiet memory and gentle continuity. Elara and Naren worked together, finishing the final touches. She adjusted knots, tightened ropes, and ensured the lanterns were all stable. Naren showed her one last subtle method to secure the ropes against wind, demonstrating the tiny adjustments that made all the difference over time. Elara followed carefully, absorbing the rhythm of his hands, the gentle guidance that asked for mindfulness rather than speed. With each adjustment, she felt the bridge respond, settling more firmly under their care. The river below murmured steadily, glimmering with reflected light. Elara paused, listening, realizing that every detail she had tended, each plank, each rope, each lantern, was part of a larger harmony. The valley, the bridge, the flowing water, the gentle wind, all existed in a delicate balance, each note strengthened by their quiet attention. She could almost feel the memories of travelers past, flowing along the wood and ropes like a hidden current, grateful for the care that had been restored. A faint rustle came from the near bank. A small bird flitted along a branch, chirping softly as the sun's rays began to touch the tops of the distant hills. Elara watched it for a moment, noting the rhythm of its movement, the gentle way it balanced on the thin branch. The bridge beneath her seemed to echo that same gentle balance, steady, welcoming, alive in its subtle way. She felt a sense of quiet pride, not for herself, but for the bridge itself, restored to its rightful presence in the valley. Naren gestured toward the far side of the bridge. "The final section is complete," he said, voice gentle, almost blending with the whisper of the river. "It has been restored, and now it will carry others safely, just as it always intended." Elara moved carefully across the span, pressing each foot to the boards, noting the stability and subtle hum under her steps. Every plank felt solid, every rope taut, every lantern steady. The bridge was whole, and she felt the quiet satisfaction of work completed with patience and care. She knelt at the center, placing her hands over a plank worn smooth by countless travelers. She traced the faint initials and etchings left long ago, imagining the hands that had carved them, the footsteps that had pressed against the same surface. Naren came to stand beside her, a calm presence, watching her with a faint smile. "Restoring the bridge is more than mending wood and rope," he said softly. "It is acknowledging what has been forgotten, honoring what has passed, and allowing it to carry forward. "You have done this well, Ilara." Ilara breathed deeply, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs. She noticed the subtle movements of the valley, the river shifting around stones, the leaves trembling in the breeze, the occasional call of a distant bird. Each detail seemed to respond to the care they had given the bridge, a quiet acknowledgement of effort and presence. She realized that restoration was as much about noticing and being present as it was about skill or strength. The bridge had taught her patience, observation, and the gentle rhythm of careful work. They moved toward the near bank together, walking slowly, each step deliberate. Ilara tested each plank lightly, noting how the boards now held evenly, supported by taut ropes, and illuminated softly by the steady glow of the lanterns. The bridge hummed faintly beneath her hands and feet, a quiet response to their attention. She felt a deep sense of connection to the bridge, to the valley, to the unseen memories of travelers past, and to Naren, who had guided her through every subtle step of this restorative journey. As they reached the first lantern, Ilara paused. The warm glow bathed the surrounding ropes and planks, highlighting the textures and patterns she had come to know intimately. She knelt to touch the wood one last time, feeling the vibrations of careful restoration, the quiet endurance of materials treated with attention. She realized that even forgotten places, when tended with care, could regain life and presence, and that small, patient actions could leave lasting marks of quiet value. Naren watched her quietly, leaning lightly on his cane. "You have restored more than wood and rope," he said softly. "You have restored presence, attention, and memory. These are the things that last beyond time." Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle gently within her. She had learned that care, patience, and attentiveness could transform even the most forgotten place into a space of quiet life and continuity. The river's soft murmur mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant calls of early morning birds. Ilara felt a profound calm settle over her, a sense of connection and accomplishment that went beyond physical labor. Every detail, every subtle touch, every careful adjustment had contributed to the restored presence of the bridge. She felt a gentle pride, not of accomplishment, but of belonging to the bridge, to the valley, and to the rhythm of careful, deliberate work. They lingered at the center for a while, letting the morning air wash over them. The valley was calm, the river steady, and the bridge beneath their feet solid and humming with quiet life. Ilara pressed her hands to the ropes one final time, feeling the subtle tension and gentle vibrations, a reminder that the bridge now carried both memory and renewed purpose. Naren remained beside her, a silent witness to the culmination of their night's efforts. The first soft rays of sunlight illuminated the far bank, highlighting the gentle curves of moss-covered stones and the faint shimmer of water in the river. Ilara stood slowly, testing the planks with careful steps. Each felt secure, steady, alive in a quiet, almost imperceptible way. She turned to Naren, a soft smile on her lips. "It feels whole," she said. He nodded, his eyes reflecting the gentle morning light. Whole, he repeated softly, and it will remain so as long as it is tended with care. Remember this feeling, the patience, the observation, the gentle touch. You carry it within you, and it will guide you in ways you may not yet understand. Ilara felt a deep warmth in her chest, a quiet understanding that the bridge had not only been restored physically, but it also imparted lessons she would carry for the rest of her life. The valley seemed to breathe with them, a soft exhalation of wind through trees, a ripple across the water, a gentle settling of light across moss and stone. The bridge stood proud yet humble, a testament to care, attention, and patient work. Ilara traced the edges one last time, feeling the hum of ropes, the smoothness of planks, the steady glow of lanterns. It was a place renewed, alive with quiet memory and purpose, waiting patiently for travelers who would cross it in days to come. They began to walk toward the village together, moving slowly, deliberately, mindful of each step. The bridge behind them glowed softly in the morning light, ropes taut, lanterns steady, planks firm. The river murmured beneath. The valley around them seemed to settle into a gentle calm, and Ilara felt the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, of a story completed not with words, but with attentive action and care. Naren stopped briefly at the midpoint, turning to look at the bridge. "It is ready," he said softly. "The bridge remembers. And now, so do you." Ilara nodded, a sense of completeness filling her. She understood that this quiet restoration was more than an act. It was a lesson in presence, patience, and the gentle rhythm of noticing. She had walked carefully, observed intently, and touched with attention, and the bridge had responded with its quiet approval. As they reached the near bank, the first full light of day spread across the valley, illuminating the river, the moss-covered stones, and the renewed bridge. Lanterns glowed softly in their fading evening light. Ropes hummed faintly, and planks held firm beneath their feet. Ilara pressed her hands to the central plank one last time, feeling the subtle vibrations of a bridge restored, alive with memory and gentle presence. She turned to Naren, a small smile of understanding and gratitude shared between them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for guiding me, for teaching me how to notice, and for showing me the quiet work of care." He nodded, eyes twinkling faintly. "The bridge will carry more than travelers," he said softly. "It will carry patience, attention, and presence. And now, so will you." Ilara breathed deeply, taking in the valley, the river, the bridge, and the soft morning light. The bridge had been restored, the ropes secure, the planks steady, and the lanterns glowing gently. Every small act of care they had given it had contributed to a quiet, enduring harmony. She realized that restoration was not only about the work done, but about the calm attention, observation, and gentle touch brought to every detail. For a long moment, they stood together on the bridge, the valley quiet except for the soft river, the rustling leaves, and the hum of the ropes. Ilara felt a sense of connection to the bridge, to the valley, to Naren, and to the countless travelers whose footsteps had come before her. She understood that their work had created something lasting, a space of calm, memory, and gentle purpose. And as the sun climbed fully into the sky, casting warm light across the valley, Ilara and Naren stepped carefully off the bridge, their work complete. The bridge stood steady, alive with quiet life, ready to carry travelers safely once more. It hummed softly, a living memory of patient hands and attentive hearts. The river, the valley, and the bridge seemed to exhale together, a gentle acknowledgement of restoration, presence, and care. Ilara took a final glance back, the bridge glowing softly in the morning light, ropes taut, planks steady, lanterns warm. She understood that this quiet, gentle work, the careful observation, the patient hands, the deliberate attention, had created more than a restored structure. It had created a calm, enduring connection to the past, the present, and the quiet, unhurried rhythm of life itself. Our second story begins with a clay water jar that sat every morning on the lowest step of a sun-warmed courtyard. It was an ordinary jar, round-bellied and cool to the touch, with a small chip near its rim and a blue cord tied around its neck. In daylight, it held clear well water for passing hands, dusty feet, and anyone who had climbed too many steps through the hill town. But some mornings, before anyone woke, the jar was found turned slightly toward the old wall, not moved far, not spilled, just turned, as if someone had lifted it in the night and set it down again while listening for a sound behind the stones. No one in the courtyard asked much about it anymore. The families who lived there had grown used to the small oddness. They said the floor was uneven. They said the wind came through the alleys strangely. They said old houses had their own habits. A boy named Sammy noticed the jar more than once. He was 13, narrow-shouldered and quiet, with ink on his fingers from copying labels for his mother's spice stall. One morning, before the market bells began, he placed his hand on the old wall beside the jar. The stone was cool, and from somewhere behind it came the faintest sound of running water. Sammy did not call for anyone. He only leaned closer. The courtyard belonged to 4 households, all joined by shared steps, shared shade, and a shared habit of speaking softly in the mornings. It stood in the lower quarter of Cameroon, a hill town built in layers of pale stone and sun-baked clay. The houses rose one above another like folded cloth, with flat roofs, carved shutters, and narrow lanes that climbed until they vanished among fig trees and whitewashed terraces. By noon, Cameroon smelled of cumin, warm bread, goat milk, orange peel, and dust. Donkeys passed slowly through the alleys with baskets of dates at their sides. Women shook rugs from the roofs. Children carried folded cloth to the dyers. Copper pans flashed in doorways, and little awnings of faded red and yellow cloth moved gently in the dry wind. Sammy lived with his mother, his aunt, and his baby sister in 2 rooms above the spice stall. His father had gone inland many years before with a caravan of wool merchants and had chosen to settle in a far valley where the winters were kinder to his lungs. Letters came twice a year, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with black thread. Sammy kept them in a wooden box beneath his sleeping mat, not because they made him sad, but because they made the world feel wide. His mother, Mara, sold cardamom, dried mint, coriander seed, rose salt, and small twists of saffron wrapped in thin paper. She had a laugh that came easily in the afternoon, but in the morning she was quiet until the first customers arrived. His Aunt Salin mended veils and hemmed market cloth, and his sister Nima, who was only 3, liked to hide copper spoons inside empty flour jars. Sammy was useful in small ways. He swept the front of the stall. He wrote careful labels with reed ink. He counted clay weights and tied packets with string. Yet he often felt that others moved through the market with a stronger purpose than he did. The potter's son could shape a bowl from wet clay. The baker's daughters could braid dough without looking. The rope maker's niece could twist palm fiber into cords that held roof beams steady. Sammy could notice things. He noticed when the saffron faded in too much light. He noticed which customers chose cinnamon by smell and which chose by price. He noticed when someone had walked a long way because their eyes went first to the water jar before they spoke. And lately, he noticed the wall. It was an old wall at the back of the courtyard, older than the houses around it. The stones were large and uneven, with pale mortar pressed deep between them. A faded line of blue tiles ran along its base, half hidden by dust and time. Most people thought it was only a boundary between the courtyard and the abandoned dye house behind it, where no cloth had been dipped in indigo for many years. The dye house had once belonged to a family of color makers who traded with caravans from the inland plains. They had used vats of blue, red, and yellow, and their dyed cloth had dried across the rooftops like pieces of sunset. But the family had moved away when the wells changed and the trade road shifted. Since then, the building had stood quiet, its wooden doors swollen, its upper windows shuttered, its courtyard filled with brittle weeds. Still, behind the wall, water moved. Sammy heard it first as a thread of sound, so soft he wondered if it had been his own breathing. Then, he heard it again the next morning, and the next. It was not the splash of a bucket. It was not rainwater, for there had been no rain in weeks. It was a steady little murmur, hidden behind stone. He said nothing at breakfast. His mother was weighing cumin seeds for a woman from the upper terraces, and his aunt was soothing Nima, who had cried because a fig had been cut into 4 pieces instead of 2. Sammy drank his tea, ate bread with sesame oil, and kept thinking about the sound. When the market grew busy, he carried a tray of spice packets to old Sabira, who lived beneath a striped awning near the west steps. Sabira was 81 years old and had once been known as the keeper of walking maps. People said that when she was young, she could guide a caravan through fog, across salt flats, or around a washed-out road by the smell of the wind and the tilt of the stars. Now, she sold mended baskets and little bundles of dried lavender. Her hands were bent but careful, and she wore a gray scarf pinned with a shell from a sea she had seen only once. Sammy liked delivering things to her because she never hurried him. That morning, Sabira sat on a low stool, weaving a split reed into the side of a basket. A cup of mint tea steamed beside her. When Sammy placed the spice packets on her table, she looked up and smiled with her eyes before she smiled with her mouth. "You have been listening to stones," she said. Sammy blinked. Sabira tightened the reed and smoothed it with her thumb. "Your ears are full of a question." He stood very still, holding the empty tray against his chest. "There is water behind our courtyard wall," he said at last. "I think there is." Sabira's hands paused, not sharply, not with surprise, only with the gentle stillness of someone setting down a memory before picking it up again. "Behind the blue tiles?" she asked. Sammy nodded. She looked past him, toward the lanes that led upward through Cameroon. Sunlight touched the white walls. A donkey bell rang twice and stopped. Somewhere, a woman laughed softly over the price of onions. "That would be the old listening channel," Sabira said. Sammy waited. Sabira returned to her basket. It carried water sound, not water itself, or not much water. Long ago, when caravans still came by the dusk road, the dyers used it to know whether the upper cistern was full. The sound traveled down through clay pipes in the wall. If the water sang clearly, the cistern had enough for washing wool and soaking cloth. If the sound thinned, they waited. Sammy looked toward the hill, though the courtyard was hidden from where he stood. Then why does it still sound? Perhaps the cistern still holds a little. Sabira tucked the reed into place. Perhaps the channel is remembering rain. Perhaps the wall has begun telling old news to anyone willing to hear it. Her answer was gentle, but it did not close the question. It opened it further. Sammy shifted the tray in his hands. "Can it be reached?" Sabira looked at him carefully now. Her face was a map of lines, each one calm and deliberate. There was once a stair, a narrow one. It ran behind the dye house and climbed inside the hill to the upper cistern. Not many used it. Dyers, water keepers, and the mule boys who carried small jars of alum and oil when the outer road grew too hot. It was called the cool stair because no sun entered it after morning. Sami imagined a stair hidden inside stone, cool and dim, with the sound of water moving somewhere above. Where is it? Sabira tied off the basket reed and reached for her tea. Forgotten things are often near the place everyone stopped looking. She drank slowly. Then she added, "Bring me a small lamp after sunset, not a bright one, and a brush, if your aunt has one she uses for cleaning seams." Sami's heart gave a quiet lift, not from fear or excitement, but from the feeling of a door opening in a room he had lived beside all his life. "All right," he said. "Tell your mother you are helping me read old marks," Sabira said. "That will be true enough." The day moved slowly after that. Sammy returned to the spice stall, but everything seemed to have two shapes, one ordinary and one hidden. The cinnamon sticks were still cinnamon sticks, tied in bundles and smelling of warm bark, but their shadows pointed toward the back courtyard. The clay jars held fennel, anise, and black pepper, but their rounded sides reminded him of buried cisterns. Even the blue cord around the water jar seemed to ask a question. His mother noticed his silence near midday. "Too much heat in your head?" she asked, setting a folded cloth over a basket of rose salt. "No," Sammy said. "I am thinking. That can be warmer than heat." Aunt Selen, who sat in the doorway, hemming a sleeve, smiled without looking up. "Let him think. He may discover where Naima hid my brass thimble." Nima, sitting in a basket beside the shade wall, immediately looked guilty. Sami laughed softly, and the day loosened again. He worked as he always worked. He measured coriander, he wrote labels, he carried a packet of dried mint to the baker's wife. He helped his mother lift the awning when the wind shifted. But beneath each task, he held the thought of the cool stair. By late afternoon, the sun had softened. Long shadows stretched across the market stones. The upper terraces glowed pale gold, and the windows of Cameroon caught the light one by one. Merchants began covering their goods. The knife sharpener packed away his wheel. The potter stacked bowls in straw. Children called to one another from the steps, their voices fading as families gathered for evening meals. Sammy waited until the sky had turned the color of watered apricots. Then he found Aunt Selen's seam brush, a small, stiff thing with a wooden back rubbed smooth by years of use. He took a clay lamp from the shelf, filled it with a little oil, and tucked a folded cloth into his satchel. His mother watched him from beside the spice jars. "Old Sabira?" she asked. Sammy nodded. She wants help reading old marks. His mother studied him for a moment. She was not a woman who missed much, but she was also not a woman who pressed every silence flat. "Stay in the lower lanes," she said, "and carry the lamp upright." "I will." She handed him a piece of flatbread folded around soft cheese and thyme. "For your thinking." He smiled and slipped it into his satchel. When he reached Sabira's awning, she was ready. She had wrapped herself in a dark blue shawl and carried a short walking stick polished from long use. At her side hung a small leather pouch, and in one hand she held a ring of old keys. "They still let you keep keys?" Sammy asked. Sabira's smile was mild. "People forget doors faster than they forget who might open them." Together they walked through the evening lanes. They did not hurry. Sabira's steps were slow, and Sammy matched them. The market sounds faded behind them, replaced by the softer sounds of the sleeping town. Water poured into basins, shutters drawn closed. A lullaby hummed through a half-open window, the faint scrape of a broom across stone. The dye house stood behind Sammy's courtyard, but its main door opened into a narrow lane choked with dry weeds and fallen plaster. In daylight, it looked tired. At dusk, it looked quieter than the houses around it, as if it had been holding its breath for many years. Sabira selected a key from the ring. It was long and dark, with a simple square tooth. "The dyers gave this to my mother," she said. "She kept route marks for them when cloth still traveled by mule to the western villages." The key turned with a low, reluctant sound. Sabira pushed the door open. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of clay, dust, old wool, and something mineral like rainwater kept in a covered jar. Sammy lifted the lamp. Its little flame showed a room with broad stone floors, empty dye vats sunk into the ground, wooden beams overhead, and hooks along the walls where cloth had once hung in folded lengths. Everything was still, not abandoned in a harsh way, only waiting. Sabira stepped in first. Sammy followed, careful to keep the lamp steady. They crossed the room slowly. Dust lay in pale sheets over the floor, marked only by the tiny tracks of lizards and the soft fall of old plaster. On one wall, faded stains of blue and madder red still clung to the stone. Sammy imagined wet cloth lifted from vats, dripping color into clay channels, carried by careful hands toward sunlight. Sabira stopped near the back wall. There, almost hidden behind a broken rack, was a line of blue tiles like the one in Sammy's courtyard. Several were cracked. One was missing. Above them, faint marks had been scratched into the plaster. Sammy held the lamp closer. The marks were not letters. They were small shapes: a jar, a crescent, 3 short lines like steps, and a circle with a dot in its center. Sabira touched the crescent with one finger. "Evening mark," she said. This was the sign for the stair used after the heat left the stones. Sammy leaned forward. "So it is here." "Yes," Sabira said, "or it was." She moved the broken rack aside with Sami's help. It groaned softly but did not fall. Behind it, the plaster wall had a narrow seam running from floor to shoulder height. At the bottom, dust had gathered thickly, and a small clay pipe emerged from the stone before disappearing again. From within the pipe came the sound Sami had heard. Water, faint and steady. Sabira gave him the seam brush. "Begin gently," she said. Sammy knelt and brushed dust away from the base of the wall. The work was small and quiet. He brushed, paused, brushed. Again, dust lifted into the lamplight and settled on his sleeves. Sabira lowered herself onto a 3-legged stool nearby and watched without rushing him. After a while, the outline of a low door appeared. It had no handle, only a round hollow near the edge, wide enough for 2 fingers. Sammy slipped his hand into it and felt cool metal inside. Sabira nodded. "Lift, then draw inward." He did. At first, nothing moved. Then the old door gave a soft sigh, as if waking from a long sleep. It opened just enough for the lamp flame to tremble. Behind it was darkness, and within the darkness, a narrow stair climbed upward through the hill. The air that came from it was cool. Sammy held the lamp toward the opening. The first steps were made of worn stone. Along one side ran a clay channel no wider than his palm. The channel was dry near the bottom, but from far above came the quiet sound of water traveling somewhere unseen. Sabira stood slowly, leaning on her stick. "There it is," she said, "the cool stair." Sami did not step forward yet. He only stood at the threshold, holding the lamp, listening to the hidden water and the calm breath of the old hill. The town outside settled into evening. Behind him, the dye house waded in dust and faded color. Before him, the stair rose into darkness, not frightening, not calling loudly, but present at last. Sabira placed one hand on the stone doorframe. "We will not climb far tonight," she said softly. "First, we learn how the stair has slept." Sammy nodded. And together they stood there quietly, letting the small lamp show the first few steps of the forgotten way. Sammy held the clay lamp very still, and the little flame leaned toward the stair as if it, too, wished to know where the cool passage went. The first few steps were shallow, worn in the middle by feet that had passed there long ago. Their edges were rounded like old bread crust, and in the hollow of each step lay a soft powder of dust. The air that came from above did not smell like the dye house. It smelled of stone, closed water, dry clay, and the faint green trace of moss growing somewhere beyond the reach of light. Sabira did not move at once. She stood with one hand on the doorframe and listened. So Sami listened too. Behind them, the old dye house kept its silence. The empty vats rested in the floor like sleeping bowls. The hooks along the wall cast thin shadows. Above them, one shutter tapped lightly in the evening breeze, then stopped. From the stair came the sound of hidden water. It was not loud. It was not near. It was a narrow, traveling murmur, softened by turns in the clay pipes and by the patient stone of the hill. Sammy thought of someone speaking in another room with a hand over the door. not asking to be heard, only continuing. Sabira lowered herself carefully onto the first step. Before any old way is used, she said, it must be greeted. Sammy glanced at her. Greeted? With eyes first, then ears, then hands. She smiled faintly. Feet come last, so they did not climb yet. Sammy placed the lamp on a flat stone beside the entrance. Its glow filled the first part of the stair with amber light. He took the seam brush from his satchel and began to clear the threshold, just as Sabira had asked. The dust lifted easily at first, dry and pale. Beneath it he found a line of small blue tiles set into the floor, each one no larger than his thumb. Some were cracked, some were missing. The remaining ones made a narrow path just to the right of the steps, following the clay channel upward. Guide tiles, Sabira said. When the lamp was low, the dyers could feel them with their toes. Blue meant the water side. Plain stone meant the walking side. Sammy brushed more carefully. The idea pleased him. A hidden path within a hidden stair. A mark not made to impress anyone, only to help tired feet remember where to go. He cleaned until the threshold showed its shape clearly. On the left, the steps rose into darkness. On the right, the small clay channel climbed beside them, fitted into the wall with a curve so smooth it seemed poured rather than built. The pipe that carried the water sound ran behind it, sometimes visible through small round openings no wider than an almond. Sabira took a folded cloth from her pouch and wiped one of the openings. Then she leaned close. Still clear enough to sing, she murmured. Sammy leaned beside her. The sound was sharper there, a thin silver thread of water moving far above. Was it built only for the dyers? He asked. For dyers first, Sabira said. Then for others. A cool stair becomes useful to more than one kind of person. Mule boys used it when the outer lane was too hot for jars of oil. The herb women used it to bring down wet mint from the upper spring gardens. Once, during a summer of cracked wells, children came here with cups, not to take water, but to listen and know the cistern had not failed. Sammy thought of the courtyard jar turning itself toward the wall. Maybe the sound still reaches our house. Maybe it has been reaching it for years, Sabira said. Only no one quieted themselves enough to notice. This made Sammy lower his eyes. He had always thought noticing was a small skill, almost not a skill at all. Other boys could lift sacks, carve handles, shape clay, mend sandals. He could hear when a spice jar was nearly empty by the dullness of the scoop. He could tell when his mother was tired by how tightly she tied packet string. He could see when a customer missed home by the way they smelled a spice twice before buying it. Now, in the old dye house, with a forgotten stair opening before him, noticing felt less like idleness and more like a key. Sabira rose slowly, her knees stiff, and took the lamp. 3 steps, she said. No farther tonight until we know the air. Sammy nodded. She stepped first, one hand on the wall, the lamp held low. Sammy followed, careful not to brush against her. The stone under his sandals felt cool and slightly damp. On the 3rd step, Sabira stopped. The world changed by a small degree. The dye house behind them seemed farther away, though it was only a few steps below. The sound of the town faded. The scent of dust gave way to mineral coolness. Sammy lifted his hand and touched the wall. It was smoother than he expected. Not raw stone, but plastered clay over stone, pressed and polished by old hands. In places, faint lines ran through it. Not cracks, but marks from the tools that had shaped it. Sabira held the lamp closer to the clay channel. "Look here," she said. A small blockage of dry leaves and grit had gathered where the channel curved. It was not enough to stop water, for no water ran there now, but it showed how years had entered quietly. Sammy opened his satchel and took out the folded cloth. He wrapped it around 2 fingers and lifted the leaves away. They crumbled softly. He brushed the corner clean, then paused to see if anything shifted. Nothing did. Sabira nodded. Good. Never wake an old place too quickly. They climbed 2 more steps. The stair narrowed slightly, and the ceiling lowered. Sammy could see where taller men must once have bowed their heads. On the wall above the channel were more marks. A jar, 3 lines, a small circle, then the shape of a leaf. "What do they mean?" he asked. "Jar means carrying point. 3 lines means steps uneven ahead. Circle means listening hole. Leaf means garden door, though we are far from it yet." "There is a garden door?" There was. Sabira's voice held neither sadness nor certainty. The upper spring gardens were small, but sweet. Mint, fennel, watercress, and a bitter green used by the dyers to fix yellow cloth. If the door still stands, it will have slept longer than the stair. Sami imagined a garden above the town, hidden behind stone, with water still moving under moss. They did not climb toward it. Not yet. Sabira turned and began descending again, slow and steady. Sammy followed, carrying the lamp now. When they returned to the dye house floor, the room felt warmer than before, and wider. The empty vats seemed less abandoned, as if the stair had lent them some of its remembered purpose. Sabira sat on the 3-legged stool and breathed quietly for a while. Sammy placed the lamp between them. Its light rested on her hands, showing the fine lines and bent fingers, the old strength that remained in them. "What should we do?" Sammy asked. "Tonight?" she said. "We close the door gently and leave the stair knowing it has been found. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we bring better brushes, a small broom, 2 lengths of cord, and a pot of softened wax for the tiles. We also bring your mother's permission." Sammy looked down at his hands. Sabira saw the movement. "A hidden place is not the same as a secret one," she said kindly. "Old ways become useful again only when they return to the keeping of many hands. Not too many at once, but enough." Sammy knew she was right. He had wanted, for one breath, to keep the cool stair as something that belonged only to him and Sabira, a private passage, a quiet answer to his own listening. But the thought changed as soon as he looked around the dye house. This place had never belonged to one person. Its vats had held cloth for families. Its water signs had guided workers. Its stair had carried jars, herbs, oil, and footsteps through the hill. A useful thing could not wake fully inside a closed fist. Together, they shut the low door. Sabira showed him how to lift the edge slightly before easing it inward, so the old hinges would not scrape. The seam nearly vanished when the door settled back into place. Sammy brushed the floor once more, not to hide what they had found, but to leave the threshold clean. They crossed the dye house slowly. At the main door, Sabira paused and turned back. The room lay quiet in the lamplight, its colors faded, but still present. Blue stains along one wall, red shadows near a vat, yellow dust caught in the cracks. Sammy wondered how many mornings had passed since anyone had stood there with work in mind rather than memory. Sabira locked the outer door. The evening lane received them with a soft breath of warm air. Above, the first stars had begun to show. Cameroon was settling into night. Lamps glowed behind carved shutters. Somewhere, a pot lid clinked. Somewhere else, a father told a child to wash both hands, not just one. They walked back through the lanes without haste. Sami carried the clay lamp, now nearly empty of oil. Sabira walked beside him with her stick tapping lightly against the stones. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of the stair, the channel, the water sound, and the small blue tiles newly uncovered beneath dust. When they reached the spice stall, Mara was rolling down the front cloth. Aunt Salin sat nearby with Nima asleep against her shoulder. One small hand closed around the missing brass thimble. Mara looked from Sammy to Sabira, then to the lamp. "Well?" she asked. Sabira answered before Sammy could decide where to begin. "There is an old stair behind the dye house," she said. "The cool stair. It may still lead to the upper cistern, or near enough to hear it clearly. Your son found the sound of it." Mara's face changed slowly, not with alarm, not with disbelief, with the careful attention of someone rearranging old knowledge. "My grandmother spoke of a water stair," she said. "I thought it was one of her market tales. Most market tales are doors with dust on them," Sabira said. Mara looked at Sammy then. "You heard it?" He nodded. Through the courtyard wall, behind the water jar, Aunt Sullen shifted Nima gently in her arms. "That jar has been turning for weeks. For longer," Sammy said. "I only noticed weeks ago." His mother stepped closer and touched the top of his head, not as she had when he was small, but lightly, with respect. "Then we will look properly." Relief moved through him, quiet and warm. They did not go back that night. Instead, Mara invited Sabira to sit in the courtyard, and Aunt Salin brought tea with fennel and a little honey. Sammy placed the lamp on the low step beside the water jar. The jar stood as it always did, round and plain, its blue cord loose around its neck. Yet now it seemed different, not magical, not strange, only connected. Behind it, the old wall held the faint murmur of water. Mara sat very still and listened. Aunt Salin leaned closer, careful not to wake Nima. Sabira closed her eyes. Sammy watched their faces soften as they heard what had been there all along. For a time, nobody spoke. The courtyard filled with the small sounds of night. A moth tapping against a lantern, distant sandals on stone, the breathing of a sleeping child, the hidden thread of water inside the wall. At last, Mara said, "Tomorrow after the morning market, we will bring brushes." "And oil," Aunt Salin added. "Old hinges dislike being remembered without oil." Sabira smiled. "And wax for the tiles." Sammy looked at the wall, then at the jar, then at the listening faces around him. The discovery no longer felt like something he might lose by sharing it. It felt larger now, steadier, like a small flame, protected by several careful hands. Later, when the tea was finished and Sabira had gone home under the stars, Sammy helped his mother stack the cups. The courtyard stones had cooled. The water jar cast a round shadow beside the old wall. He paused before going inside and placed his palm once more against the stone. The sound was there, soft, patient, unhurried. Tomorrow, they would return with brushes, oil, wax, cord, and permission. Tomorrow, they would begin the slow work of waking the cool stare properly. For now, Sammy only listened until his breathing matched the hidden water. Then, he went inside, leaving the jar turned gently toward the wall. The next morning, the sun had barely touched the tiled roofs of Cameroon when Sami slipped quietly from the spice stall to the courtyard. The air smelled of warm stone, drying herbs, and the faint, lingering scent of cinnamon from the previous day. His satchel was filled with carefully wrapped brushes, lengths of cord, a small tin of wax, and a clay lamp with fresh oil. His mother had given him a nod as he left, a quiet permission that carried more weight than any spoken instructions. Sammy paused at the base of the water jar. It rested where he had left it the night before, blue cord slightly askew, the surface cool to the touch. He ran a hand across its rounded belly and listened. Beneath the ordinary hum of the courtyard, he could still hear the faint, traveling sound of water moving inside the hidden channel behind the wall. It was quiet, but insistent, a gentle thread connecting the ordinary morning with the forgotten stare above. Sabira was waiting at the foot of the alley that led to the dye house. She had wrapped herself in a dark blue shawl and carried her walking stick as always. But this morning, her presence seemed sharper, more deliberate. "Are you ready?" she asked, not expecting an answer. Sammy nodded and held the lamp upright so its small flame would not flicker. They moved together through the quiet lanes, careful not to disturb the few early risers. The scent of baked bread drifted from the upper terraces, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp clay and dry herbs. A donkey brayed softly in the distance, and somewhere a woman's voice carried a greeting to her neighbor, the sound falling like a gentle ribbon through the alleyways. Sammy felt as though the city itself was holding its breath, watching them go, waiting. The dye house door was unlocked with the key Sabira had used the night before. The hinges groaned slightly as she pushed it open. Sammy's lamp revealed the interior, vats sunk into the stone floor, wooden beams spanning the ceiling, hooks along the walls for hanging wet cloth. Dust swirled in the amber light, stirred by their careful steps. The faint stains of blue, red, and yellow lingered on the walls, faded yet stubborn, like the memory of labor long past. Sabira gestured toward the low door of the hidden stair. "Start slowly," she instructed. "Listen first, then see, then touch." Sami nodded, placing the lamp on the floor beside him. He knelt and brushed lightly at the edges of the door, clearing the layer of dust that had settled overnight. The seam appeared more clearly, revealing the narrow hollow where water murmured unseen. The sound seemed sharper now, closer, as though acknowledging their renewed attention. Sabira handed him the brushes. "Use the soft one first," she said. "Treat the dust as a veil, not a barrier." Sammy followed her instructions, gently sweeping the dust away, revealing the first steps. The worn stones were cool, smooth, and slightly damp in patches. He noted the tiny grooves carved by generations of feet, the faint indentations where jars had been dragged, and the subtle curve of the walls that kept the channel flowing steadily alongside the steps. Once the initial layer was cleared, Sabira joined him at the bottom step. She crouched low and pointed to faint scratches along the plaster. "These are marks of use," she said. "Follow them carefully. They will guide you." Sami traced the lines with his finger, feeling the roughness of stone beneath the plaster and the subtle rhythm of wear. Each groove, each mark, seemed like a whisper from the past, a gentle instruction left by hands that had known this stair long before he had. They began to ascend. The air grew cooler and damper with each step, carrying the scent of moss and stone. Sami noticed how the channel ran uninterrupted alongside the steps, small pools of residual water catching the lamplight. Sabira moved slowly, her hand brushing the wall lightly to steady herself. She allowed Sami to lead, guiding him only with quiet encouragement. The lamp cast long, trembling shadows that stretched up the stair, hinting at spaces beyond the immediate light, spaces that seemed alive with memory. At the fifth step, Sami found a small obstruction, a piece of broken tile wedged into the channel. It was not large, but it caught the flow of air and sound, diverting the delicate murmur. He paused and removed it carefully, placing it aside. The sound of water shifted, becoming more distinct, a steady thread of clarity moving up the hidden pipe. Sabira nodded, approving the attention to detail. "Even the smallest obstacle can change the way a stair speaks," she said softly. "Remember that." They continued, and the stair narrowed further. The ceiling lowered, forcing them to bow slightly. Sami's fingers traced the edges of the channel, noting where the clay had chipped, where small cracks had formed over years of temperature changes. Sabira showed him how to fill minor gaps with softened wax, smoothing it into the channel so that water, when it returned, would flow unimpeded. Sami worked carefully, each movement deliberate, mindful of the centuries of use the stair had seen. At the midpoint, the channel curved sharply. The sound of water became clearer here, traveling from an unseen spring above. Sami crouched low, holding the lamp close, and swept away dust and cobwebs from the curve. He noticed faint stains along the plaster, pale blue and green, almost invisible but persistent. Sabira pointed them out. "These were once marks of measurement," she said. "They guided jars of water to the right level for the vats below. People trusted them without speaking." Sami nodded, marveling at the silent communication embedded in the walls, a conversation in stone and clay that had lasted decades. Sami brushed the upper portion of the stair with a smaller, softer brush, revealing additional marks, a circle with a dot, a crescent, and tiny notches along the channel. Sabira explained each quietly. "Circle means the listening point. Crescent shows where jars should rest. Notches indicate steps with uneven footing." Sami traced each carefully with his finger, absorbing the subtle language of the stair. He realized that the cool stair was more than a passage. It was a living record, a system of knowledge encoded in stone, clay, and quiet water sound. They paused to rest. Sami placed the lamp on a step, illuminating the space around them. The faint murmur of water seemed to swell slightly, carrying with it the echoes of those who had climbed before: dyers, mule boys, herb women, and children. Sabira leaned against the wall, her eyes closed briefly, listening. Sammy sat cross-legged, allowing himself to feel the rhythm of the stair, the gentle vibration of the channel, and the calm patience embedded in every surface. After a few moments, they resumed. The upper steps were steeper, the ceiling lower, and the channel narrower. Sammy's hands moved carefully, clearing small debris and smoothing minor irregularities with softened wax. He noted the gradual shift in the air, cooler, slightly humid, carrying the scent of hidden springs. The faint sound of water now traveled with purpose, like a small song moving through the stone, welcoming attentive listeners. At the top of the stair, the channel led to a small hatch embedded in a wall of weathered clay. The blue tiles formed a narrow path leading up to it. Sabira gestured toward the hatch. "Here," she whispered, "is where the stair ends, and the upper cistern begins. But it is delicate. Treat it as a treasure, not a tool." Sami approached cautiously, brushing the surrounding dust and examining the hatch. The metal was cool and slightly corroded, but the frame was solid. He could hear the faint, steady murmur of water beyond it. Sabira handed him a piece of cord. "Tie a loop. This will help when we open it fully. We do not rush what has been hidden for so long." Sammy did as instructed, knotting the cord carefully, ensuring it was secure. Each movement was deliberate, measured, respectful of the stair's long sleep. Sabira watched silently, approving without words. The quiet understanding between them grew, rooted in patience, observation, and shared care. Sammy lifted the hatch slightly, enough to let the lamp light spill into the opening. The sound of water was louder now, clearer, filling the stair with a soft, steady rhythm. He could see a small pool beyond, fed by a channel that had carried water to the cistern for generations. The light revealed faint traces of algae on the walls, small sediment lines, and the gentle curvature of clay forming the channel. Everything was as it had been, waiting for attentive hands. Sabira crouched beside him, pointing to minor cracks along the clay walls. "We reinforce these slowly, not with force, not with haste, but with understanding." Sammy nodded, feeling the importance of each detail, the quiet responsibility of tending a place that had been neglected, yet never forgotten. He realized that restoration was not only a physical act, it was a conversation with the past, an acknowledgement of the labor, care, and knowledge of those who had built the stair. Hours passed as they worked in measured rhythm. Sammy brushed, polished, and repaired small cracks with wax. Sabira guided, suggested, and occasionally held the lamp for better illumination. The water's murmur became a steady companion, a song of patience and endurance. Each tile, each step, each curve of the clay channel received careful attention. Sammy felt a deep satisfaction in the work, not from accomplishment, but from participating in the quiet revival of something long overlooked. By mid-afternoon, the stair had been cleared, repaired, and gently reinforced. The water's sound moved freely through the channel, unimpeded by dust or small debris. Sammy stepped back, leaning against the wall, and let the lamp rest beside him. The stair seemed to exhale, the air settling into a calm, steady rhythm. Sabira smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting quiet pride. "Tomorrow," she said, "we follow the channel to the upper cistern itself. We will not rush the journey, only prepare it. A hidden place reveals itself slowly, and we must be ready to listen carefully." Sammy nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of what they had uncovered. The cool stair had been discovered, attended to, and partially restored. Its murmur had been acknowledged. And in that quiet, deliberate work, he had begun to understand the delicate art of noticing, tending, and honoring what had been long forgotten. As they descended the stair together, the afternoon light spilled across the dye house floor. The vats rested in silence, the beams above cast long shadows, and the faint scent of old dyes mingled with dust and clay. Outside, the courtyard was bright and warm, the water jar waiting silently for the next attentive hand. Sammy looked at it and smiled softly, knowing that tomorrow and the day after, the stair and its channel would reveal more of their quiet secrets. He carried the lamp carefully, and Sabira followed at his side. Step by step, they returned to the courtyard, leaving the stair in peace for the evening. The murmur of water continued quietly behind the wall, awaiting the hands that would come again, patient, careful, and attentive. The next morning, the courtyard was calm, filled with the scent of warm stone and drying herbs. Sammy arrived first, carrying the small lamp, the bundle of brushes, the wax, and lengths of cord. The clay water jar rested in its usual place, round and plain, yet somehow more significant, as if aware of the stair they had begun to uncover. He placed the lamp beside it and listened. The faint murmur of water from behind the wall seemed sharper now, a gentle reminder that the stair had been attended to, but its work was far from complete. Sabira arrived shortly afterward, her shawl drawn tightly across her shoulders, and her walking stick tapping lightly on the stone steps. She carried a small leather pouch containing additional tools, a tiny trowel, a set of wooden wedges, and a soft cloth for polishing the channel. Her presence was calm, steady, and deliberate, a constant rhythm for Sammy to follow as they prepared to ascend the hidden stair once more. "Today," she said quietly, "we explore the upper stretch. We prepare it to receive water freely, and we listen closely. Every mark, every curve, every small crack speaks. We respond to it gently." Sammy nodded. He adjusted the lamp's wick and held it high, its small flame trembling but steady. He felt a thrill of quiet anticipation, not excitement, not fear, but the soft thrill of discovery, of being entrusted with a place that had not been noticed for decades. They entered the dye house, the familiar smell of clay, dust, and faint traces of old dye filling the air. The stairs waited for them at the back, hidden behind the low door. Sammy knelt to brush the threshold once more, revealing the first steps and the clay channel running alongside them. The faint water murmur moved steadily upward, a soft, deliberate rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Sabira followed him slowly, observing. "Notice the bends," she whispered. "See how the channel curves, how the stones are shaped, how the steps are worn. Each is a guide, not only for water, but for hands, feet, and care. The stair tells us how it wants to be treated." They climbed carefully, step by step. Sammy brushed dust from the grooves, polished the worn surfaces with wax, and adjusted loose tiles along the channel. Each movement was deliberate, measured, an act of quiet attention. He noticed the faint indentations of jars dragged along the steps, small scratches in the plaster, tiny notches along the channel. These were the stair's memory, waiting for hands willing to follow and interpret. At the midpoint, the stair narrowed, and the ceiling sloped lower. Sammy's shoulders brushed the stone above him, and he realized that every inch of the passage had been shaped to guide those who used it carefully. The channel widened slightly at the top of the bend, allowing water to flow more freely. Sammy ran his fingers along the edge, feeling the smoothness of worn clay, the subtle curves designed to move liquid without spilling. Sabira crouched beside him. A passage built with understanding, not haste, she said. Water moves slowly, stones settle slowly, and our hands must move slowly as well. Sammy nodded. He adjusted the wax along a small crack in the clay channel, pressing it gently into place. The water's murmur seemed to respond, softening and clarifying, traveling upward with renewed clarity. The stair felt alive, not in danger or surprise, but in quiet responsiveness to careful attention. They continued upward, clearing debris, polishing the tiles, and tightening the cord that ran along the hand edge of the stair. Every small task carried weight. The blue tiles marking the channel's path reflected the lamp's flame, guiding their hands just as they had guided the dyers decades ago. Sammy realized that restoration was more than repairing physical structures. It was about listening, learning, and moving in harmony with the place. By mid-morning, they reached a section where the plaster had cracked along the channel's edge. Sabira handed him a small trowel. "Fill it lightly, not firmly," she instructed. "The channel must breathe. Overfixing will resist the water it has carried for years." Sammy followed carefully, smoothing the wax and clay mixture into the crack. He pressed gently, then stepped back to observe. The channel seemed unchanged, yet its subtle vibration felt stronger, more confident, as if the small repair had restored a piece of its patience. They paused for a moment, listening. The water's murmur traveled upward, echoing faintly against the stair walls. It was not a roar, not even a trickle, simply the quiet sound of flow, a living guide. Sammy realized he could trace its path with his ears alone, noticing where it slowed, where it ran cleanly, where it hinted at minor obstructions. Every bend, every curve, every gentle slope mattered. Sabira moved forward, holding the lamp and examining the upper steps. "The stair has learned from time," she said softly. "It remembers every hand that has touched it, every foot that has stepped. It has rested and endured. We must not hurry it now." Sammy followed, brushing dust from the tiles, smoothing edges, and adjusting the cord where it had loosened. He noticed tiny pools of residual water in the channel bends. They were not a problem, just reminders of how the stair had carried liquid before. He polished them gently, watching as the water thread continued upward, clear and deliberate. At the top of the bend, they found the hatch leading to the upper cistern. Sammy knelt to brush dust from the hinges. They were stiff but intact. Sabira handed him a small length of cord, instructing him to create a loop for easy lifting. He tied it carefully, the knot tight yet flexible. The hatch would open without strain, preserving the delicate stone and clay around it. They did not lift it yet. Instead, they continued inspecting the channel above. The upper portion of the stair was narrower, steeper, and darker. Sammy adjusted the lamp, casting light along the curve of the channel and the worn stone steps. He traced the tiles with his fingers, ensuring none were loose or cracked. Each movement was deliberate, patient, and filled with quiet respect. Sabira watched him work. Notice how the channel bends, how the tiles guide, how the plaster holds the memory of water. Each detail tells a story. Do not rush the story, or you will miss it. Sammy nodded, feeling the calm weight of her words. Restoration was not a single act. It was a series of careful, deliberate movements, each one part of a larger whole. The stair, the channel, the water, the tiles, they were all connected, waiting for patient hands and attentive minds. They worked slowly, step by step, for hours. Sammy cleaned debris, polished tiles, and reinforced minor cracks with wax. Sabira guided his hands when needed, adjusted the lamp to reveal faint details, and whispered instructions with calm authority. The water's murmur became clearer with each step, moving freely along the channel, carrying with it the quiet history of those who had used the stair before them. By midday, they reached the uppermost portion of the stair beneath the hatch. The space was cool, damp, and quiet. Sammy knelt, brushing the final tiles clean and smoothing the channel edges. He paused, listening to the water's murmur, tracing its subtle path with his ears and fingers. The stair felt alive, not in the sense of movement or threat, but as a vessel of memory, a living record of care, attention, and quiet labor. Sabira crouched beside him. "The stair is ready," she said softly. "We have prepared it to carry water again, to teach those who will follow. But the final step, opening the hatch, must wait until we are certain of our hands and our patience." Sammy nodded. He realized that restoration was a slow process, a dialogue with time, materials, and memory. Each brushstroke, each adjustment, each careful observation had restored not only the stair, but also the rhythm of attentiveness, the awareness of subtle signs, and the patience to move in harmony with the world around him. They descended the stairs slowly, step by step, careful not to disturb the work they had done. The water's murmur remained steady, clear, and deliberate. Sammy carried the lamp, its small flame steady against the cool air. Sabira followed at his side, her presence a calm anchor in the quiet space. When they reached the dye house floor, Sammy placed the lamp carefully on a shelf. The room seemed brighter somehow, filled with the soft glow of restored attention. The vats lay in quiet patience, the wooden beams above cast calm shadows, and the faint traces of old dye reflected the gentle light. The stair, hidden behind the low door, hummed softly with water and memory. Outside, the courtyard awaited. The clay water jar rested in its familiar place, round and plain. Sammy knelt beside it and touched the blue cord. He could still hear the stair's soft murmur through the wall, now more distinct, more present, more alive. It had been attended to, respected, and slowly restored. Mara, Aunt Selen, and Nemo were waiting, and they gathered quietly around him. Sammy explained briefly what they had done, omitting no detail, but letting the quiet presence of the stairs speak for itself. His mother smiled softly. "Patience and attention," she said. "You have learned well." Sabira rose and brushed her hands. "Tomorrow, we will climb the final steps. We will open the hatch, see the cistern, and understand the stairs' full purpose. But tonight, we leave it resting." Sammy nodded, feeling the weight of that careful pace. The courtyard settled into evening, soft shadows stretching across the stone. The lamp glowed gently beside the jar, illuminating its smooth surface. The hidden stair behind the wall waited, patient and unhurried, carrying the sound of water and the echo of attentive hands. Sammy understood that discovery was not a race. Restoration was not a single act. Both were slow, deliberate, and quietly joyful when approached with respect. He breathed in the evening air, tasted the faint scent of dried herbs, and listened to the water's song. The stair, the channel, and the jar were no longer forgotten. They were alive in memory, care, and attention, waiting for the next patient hand to continue the work. The morning air was soft and cool when Sami arrived at the courtyard, carrying the lamp, brushes, wax, and cord as he had done the day before. The sun had barely begun to touch the rooftops, spreading pale light across the uneven stones. The clay water jar rested in its usual place, round and unremarkable to anyone who had not begun to notice its quiet significance. But Sami's awareness made it different. Every curve, every small chip, every shadow it cast seemed alive with memory. The faint murmur of water from the hidden stair traveled to his ears, clearer now, as if it had been waiting for him to return. Sabira arrived shortly afterward, her shawl drawn tight, walking stick tapping softly against the stone. She carried a small leather pouch, worn and familiar, containing the tools they would need for the final phase of their work. The two of them moved together toward the dye house, their steps slow and deliberate, respectful of the quiet morning and the secrets held within the stone walls. Sammy felt a sense of anticipation that was calm, steady, and deeply focused. This was not excitement, but the quiet thrill of discovery and careful restoration. Inside the dye house, the air smelled of clay, dust, and faint remnants of old dyes, blue, red, and yellow. The empty vats rested in the floor like silent guardians of memory. Wooden beams spanned the ceiling, and the hooks along the walls cast thin shadows in the amber lamplight. Sammy adjusted the wick of his lamp, holding it high enough to illuminate the stair they had discovered and partially restored, but not so high as to cast distracting shadows. Every detail mattered: the curves of the steps, the alignment of tiles along the channel, the faint scratches left by hands long gone. Sabira knelt at the threshold of the low door leading to the hidden stair. "We take it slowly," she whispered. "Observe, listen, then touch. The stair remembers every hand, every foot. Treat it as you would a fragile story." Sammy nodded and knelt beside her, placing the lamp on a stable step so that its soft glow fell on the channel and the worn blue tiles. The water's murmur was steady, clear, and inviting, as if it recognized their careful approach. They began to ascend the stair, step by step. The first section was familiar, each groove and curve known to Sammy, yet each step carried new attention. He brushed dust from the edges, polished the tiles with softened wax, and adjusted small cracks in the plaster channel. The air was cool, carrying faint hints of moss and stone. Sabira followed closely, offering guidance only when necessary, allowing Sammy to experience the rhythm of the stair on his own. At the midpoint where the ceiling sloped lower and the stair narrowed, Sammy paused to examine a section of the clay channel. Water from the hidden cistern above had left faint traces, a greenish film along the curve. He applied softened wax gently, pressing it into the edges to reinforce the channel. Sabira watched, her eyes quiet and approving. "See how attention transforms the stair?" she asked. "We are not forcing it to move. We are teaching it to remember, to flow again as it once did." Sammy continued upward, feeling the steady murmur of water beneath the plaster. The steps grew steeper, the ceiling lower, and the channel narrower. He adjusted each tile, smoothed small irregularities, and ensured that the cord along the hand edge was secure. Each movement was deliberate and mindful. He realized that restoration was not simply physical repair. It was an act of listening, understanding, and participating in the memory of the stair. As they approached the top, the final section of the stair, Sami noticed faint markings along the plaster, small circles, lines, and leaf-like shapes. These were guides left by the dyers and water keepers of long ago. Sabira crouched beside him, pointing out each symbol, circle, listening point. Lines, uneven steps. Leaf, garden door above. Each mark communicates silently. Notice, understand, respond. Sammy traced each with his fingers, absorbing the subtle language embedded in the stair. They paused to rest. The air at the top of the stair was cooler, damper, carrying the faint scent of moss and stone. The water's murmur was clearer than ever, flowing steadily through the clay channel. Sammy held the lamp high, illuminating the hatch leading to the cistern. Sabira gestured to it. "The final step is here, but it must be approached with patience, reverence, and care. We do not rush what has slept for decades." Sammy knelt beside the hatch, brushing away dust and small debris. The hinges were intact but stiff. He tied a loop of cord to the handle, creating a secure grip. Sabira nodded, approving his careful work. "Remember, gentle, deliberate, steady. The stair and cistern will respond to your hands, not your haste." They lifted the hatch slowly, the sound of old metal brushing against stone soft and measured. Beyond it lay the upper cistern, a small chamber of stone filled with water, still and clear. The murmur of the channel below joined the faint echoes of the cistern, creating a delicate, steady harmony. Sammy leaned closer, holding the lamp so its light fell across the water. He saw faint traces of algae along the edges and the subtle curve of the stone walls. Everything was intact, waiting patiently for attentive hands. Sabira handed him a small brush and a piece of cloth. "We clean only what must be touched," she said. "The cistern will teach us what it needs, step by step." Sammy dipped the brush in water drawn from the channel below and began gently clearing sediment from the edges of the cistern. Each stroke revealed more detail, tiny grooves, small impressions, the curve of stone steps leading into the water. He realized the cistern had been patiently holding itself in readiness for centuries, waiting for someone to recognize it. Hours passed in quiet labor. Sammy and Sabira worked methodically, brushing, polishing, and reinforcing small cracks with wax. The water's murmur traveled steadily, clear and deliberate, as if approving each movement. Sammy learned to listen with his fingers, noticing subtle vibrations through the brush and the lamp's handle. Each adjustment, each gentle stroke, restored not only the cistern and stair, but also a rhythm of attention, patience, and presence. By midday, the upper cistern had been cleared, repaired, and gently reinforced. The water flowed freely through the channel, the tiles aligned, and the plaster smoothed. Sammy stepped back, leaning against the wall, letting the lamp rest beside him. The cistern seemed to exhale, the water flowing with clarity, and the stair beneath it hummed softly with renewed life. Sabira smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting quiet pride and approval. They did not descend immediately. Instead, they paused, listening to the combined murmur of water, stone, and channel. Sammy realized that the cool stair, the hidden channel, and the cistern were not merely physical structures. They were repositories of memory, patient teachers, and living lessons in attentive care. Each stone, each curve, each channel spoke to those willing to listen and move with understanding. After a long pause, Sabira guided Sammy down the stair slowly. Each step was deliberate, measured, and careful. The channel carried the water's murmur steadily, responding to the gentle movement of their hands and feet. The lamp illuminated the path, casting soft, trembling light across the worn stones and blue tiles. Sammy felt the rhythm of the stair entering his bones, the quiet satisfaction of careful, deliberate work, filling him with calm and contentment. At the bottom, the dye house awaited. The vats lay in silent patience. The beams above cast calm shadows, and the faint traces of old dye reflected the gentle light. Sammy replaced the lamp on a stable shelf, allowing its glow to illuminate the room without disturbing the newly restored channel. The stair behind the low door hummed softly, carrying the sound of flowing water and memory, a quiet testimony to the patient labor of attentive hands. Outside, the courtyard was warm with afternoon light. The clay water jar rested where it had always been, its blue cord loose but familiar. Sammy knelt beside it, touching its rounded surface and listening to the faint water murmur through the wall. The hidden stair, the cistern, and the channel had been restored. Their rhythm was clear, deliberate, and alive. The jar, the wall, and the courtyard itself seemed to acknowledge the work, a subtle, invisible connection forming between them. Mara, Aunt Selen, and Nima were waiting quietly, having prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and figs. Sammy explained briefly what they had accomplished, focusing on the care, attention, and patience required to restore the stair and cistern. His mother smiled softly, her eyes reflecting pride and calm understanding. Aunt Selen nodded approvingly, and Nima, still small, clutched a folded piece of cloth, fascinated by the story of hidden water and quiet work. Sabira remained a quiet presence at the edge of the courtyard, her eyes observing the courtyard jar, the water murmur, and the gentle faces of those who had shared in the discovery. Tomorrow, she said softly. We will document the marks, polish the tiles fully, and ensure the channel remains clear. Restoration is ongoing, but for today, we let the stair, the cistern, and the jar rest, knowing they have been noticed and attended to. Sammy felt a profound calm settle over him. The hidden stair, the channel, the cistern, and even the small water jar had taught him lessons in patience, careful observation, and quiet care. He realized that attentive hands and listening ears could restore more than physical objects. They could revive memory, connection, and the enduring rhythm of place. The day faded into evening, and the courtyard settled into a gentle calm. Lanterns glowed softly in windows, the faint rustle of leaves drifted in the warm air, and the sound of flowing water from the hidden channel remained, steady and serene. Sammy stood for a moment, touching the blue cord of the jar, listening and smiling softly. He had learned that quiet labor, patience, and observation could uncover hidden stories, restore forgotten places, and bring peace to both the hands that worked and the spaces that had waited. Sabira placed a hand on his shoulder. You have done well, she said. The stair, the cistern, and the channel will carry water again. They will continue to teach those who follow. And you, Sammy, have learned to listen. Sammy nodded, feeling the weight and warmth of her words. The courtyard, the hidden stair, and the cistern were no longer forgotten. They had been restored, gently and deliberately, through careful hands, attentive eyes, and patient hearts. And in that quiet, deliberate work, Sammy had discovered a rhythm of care, observation, and presence that would remain with him long after the stair had returned to silence once more. He looked around the courtyard one last time before retreating indoors. The water jar, the hidden wall, and the faint sound of flowing water were still there, calm and steady. Everything had been touched, acknowledged, and renewed. Sammy realized that discovery, attention, and care were ongoing acts, and that even the smallest gestures, the sweep of a brush, the smoothing of wax, the careful alignment of a tile, could restore both place and spirit. That night, as the lamps dimmed and the courtyard quieted, Sammy lay on his mat with the faint murmur of the hidden stair in his ears. He thought of the channel, the cistern, the water jar, and the careful hands that had guided him. In his heart, he carried the calm rhythm of the work, a quiet knowledge that attentive care could bring life to forgotten spaces, and that every discovery was a gift of patient, steady observation. The hidden stair, now fully restored, waited patiently for the next set of hands. The water murmured steadily through the channel. The upper cistern held its quiet reserve, ready to share its resource with anyone willing to listen. And Sammy, small, attentive, and deliberate, had learned the gentle art of noticing, restoring, and honoring the memory of places long forgotten. Our third story begins as we step into a small, sunlit courtyard where a wooden wheel rests against the corner of an abandoned granary. It is an ordinary wheel, round and rough with splintered edges, and yet it holds a faint warmth from the afternoon sun. The grain of the wood is smooth in some places, worn by long use, cracked in others, and a thin layer of moss hugs its rim. Children used to spin it as they passed. Merchants used it for carts once, and now it sits quietly, waiting for hands that remember how to move slowly and carefully. But one morning, a faint hum vibrates through its spokes. Not a sound of movement, not the creak of wood under weight, but a subtle echo, almost imperceptible, that seems to come from the granary behind it. It is a sound that draws attention, though nobody seems to know why. People glance, shrug, and move on. The wheel remains, patient, its secret quiet yet persistent. Nobody had ever asked what caused the hum, or why it began at sunrise and faded by noon. It was just another detail in the quiet village of Lumia, nestled in the hills where the stone streets curled tightly and every roof caught the sun differently. Some children had noticed it before, some had forgotten. Some adults had thought it a trick of wind or the settling of the old building. A girl named Leora paused before the wheel that morning. She was 11, with soft black hair tied with a piece of cloth and eyes that lingered on small movements others missed. She crouched, brushing dust from the rim with her sleeve, and the hum seemed to respond, faintly, almost like a greeting. She did not call anyone. She did not speak. She only leaned closer and let her fingers trace the worn grain. The granary behind the wheel had been unused for decades. Its wooden doors were swollen from rain and sun, hinges darkened with rust. The roof sloped unevenly, tiles missing in patches where wind had stolen them. Inside, sacks of grain long decomposed had left only shadows and a faint smell of earth and straw. Sunlight fell through cracks, casting rectangles of warmth on the dusty floor, illuminating patterns unnoticed for years. Leora had come from a family that managed small plots on the hillside. Her mother tended herbs, her father repaired simple tools, and her grandfather, old Tavan, had once guided mule trains along routes forgotten by most villagers. Tavan was 84, slow in gait, but sharp in memory. His hands were bent but skilled, and his voice, though soft, carried the calm authority of experience. He had taught Leora to notice, to wait, and to respect the work of old hands. That morning, Leora slipped inside the granary with Tavan following slowly behind. The air smelled of dust, straw, and faintly of clay from the walls. She held a small brush, a length of cord, and a lamp with fresh oil. Every step was careful, every movement deliberate, conscious of the hum that rose subtly from the wooden wheel. Tavan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen first," he whispered. "Let the wheel speak before you touch." Leora crouched beside the wheel, her fingers hovering just above the surface. She could feel the vibration beneath her fingertips, soft and steady, like a heartbeat that had been waiting for attention. The granary seemed to hold its breath. Sunlight fell through gaps in the roof, dust motes dancing in the air, highlighting the textures of old wood and stone. Leora traced the wheel slowly, noting cracks, splinters, and worn patches. Every detail carried a story. Every notch, groove, and faded stain spoke of use, care, and passage of time. Tavan leaned on his cane, watching. "Every old object remembers," he said. "Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it hums. Our task is not to force it, but to understand what it asks of us." Leora nodded. She began to work carefully, cleaning the surface with the brush, following the patterns in the wood, and observing the faint hum as it shifted under her touch. Each movement was slow, deliberate, full of attention. The wheel responded with a gentle vibration, steadying as her hands traced its rim. Through the gaps in the granary walls, the village outside began to wake. The smell of baking bread drifted from nearby kitchens. Donkeys brayed in distant lanes. Children called across stone courtyards, and the first hints of wind stirred loose tiles on the roof. Inside, Leora and Taven remained quiet, focused on the wheel and the faint hum that connected it to the long-forgotten mechanisms within the granary. The wheel, though motionless, seemed alive with memory. Leora noticed the subtle curve in one spoke, the way a splintered edge caught the light differently than the rest. She traced it with her fingers, imagining hands that had once repaired it, loaded carts, and moved sacks of grain. Every detail mattered, every careful observation a thread connecting her to the past. Taven spoke softly. The wheel is part of a larger route. It carried loads, guided steps, held weight. Restoring it is not just about wood and iron. It is about returning its purpose slowly, deliberately, with respect. Leora's fingers moved along the rim, brushing away dust and small debris. The hum grew faintly stronger, almost as if the wheel acknowledged her careful attention. Sunlight shifted through the roof, illuminating patterns of grain dust settled in corners and along cracks in the floor. She paused to study these marks, noting where the wheel had been used most heavily, where repairs had been made long ago, and where time had worn it smooth. Hours passed as they worked together, cleaning, inspecting, and preparing the wheel. Taven guided her hands gently, showing her subtle ways to press the wood, adjust the spokes, and align the rim. Each small correction brought the wheel into steadier resonance, its faint hum clearer, steady, and deliberate. Leora realized that restoration was not merely repair. It was a dialogue with history, memory, and patient care. At last, the wheel rested solid and steady against the granary wall. The hum beneath it was soft but clear, traveling along its spokes and into the floorboards, a gentle reminder of its purpose and history. Leora stepped back, allowing herself a moment to observe the wheel as a whole. Its curves, textures, and vibrations spoke of use, care, and enduring presence. Taven smiled faintly. Tomorrow we begin the channel behind the granary. The wheel is only the first part of the forgotten route. Each step must be attended to, each path remembered. That is how usefulness returns. Leora nodded. She felt the weight of his words, a quiet understanding settling into her chest. Restoration was a slow, deliberate act. It required patience, observation, and gentle hands. And in the hum of the wheel, she had begun to feel the rhythm of the larger route, a path that connected her, Taven, and the village through time and careful attention. The afternoon light grew warmer as they left the granary. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams. The wheel behind them rested quietly, hum steady, patient, and alive. Leora and Taven moved through the village lanes without hurry, their minds filled with plans for the next stage of restoration, the hidden channel, the pathways, and the steps that had been long forgotten. By the time they reached the courtyard, the day was well advanced. Villagers passed, unaware of the hidden hum and the work that had begun. The water jar remained in its familiar place, the cord loose around its neck. Leora paused, pressing a hand lightly against it, as if acknowledging that small, patient acts connected the wheel and jar, the stair and cistern, across stories and villages. She carried the quiet understanding of the wheel, the granary, and the forgotten route into the evening. When she lay down that night, the hum of the wheel lingered in her ears, not loud, not urgent, but steady, patient, and deliberate. It was a promise of what was to come: careful restoration, slow discovery, and the gentle return of usefulness to forgotten places. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the narrow lanes of Lumea, falling in soft stripes across the courtyard where the wooden wheel rested. The air carried the scents of fresh bread, warming stone, and drying herbs, mingling with the faint aroma of the granary's old timber. Leora approached the wheel with the lamp in her hand, careful not to jostle its rim. She carried a bundle of small brushes, lengths of cord, and a tin of softened wax. The hum beneath the wheel greeted her quietly, steady and insistent, a sound that had become familiar, almost like a living heartbeat within the granary's walls. Tavin joined her shortly after, his walking stick tapping softly on the stone floor. He wore his dark blue shawl as always, and his eyes glimmered with quiet approval. "We continue," he said softly. "Today, we prepare the wheel to move again, not with force, but with understanding. Each spoke, each rim, each connection must be felt, observed, and returned to purpose." Leora nodded, crouching beside the wheel. Her fingers traced the rough edges of the spokes, noting splintered sections, worn patches, and small cracks in the rim. She ran her hand along the hub, pressing gently into its center, feeling the vibrations as the wheel hummed faintly. Tavin leaned close, showing her how to test the tension of each spoke, and how to sense where the wood had shifted over years of disuse. "The wheel speaks," he said. "If we listen, it tells us what it needs." The first step was to clean the rim and spokes. Leora used the softest brush, gently removing dust and small debris. She discovered fine grooves where ropes had rubbed against the wood, tiny notches left by repeated handling, and faint stains from old grain and moisture. Each mark carried history, a story of labor and life, and Leora felt a quiet reverence for it. The hum beneath the wheel shifted slightly as she worked, a subtle response to her attentive touch. Tavin guided her hands to the hub, demonstrating the careful motion needed to test the wood's resilience without applying too much pressure. Leora followed, pressing gently, feeling the subtle give and recovery in the old timber. The hum grew a little clearer, as if the wheel recognized the care being taken. She noted the slight imbalance in one spoke, where the wood had dried and cracked. Tavin showed her how to apply softened wax to stabilize it, smoothing it along the grain until the vibration beneath her hands felt even. Hours passed as they worked methodically. Each spoke was cleaned, inspected, and reinforced. The rim was polished, small cracks filled with wax, and the wheel gradually regained a quiet stability. Leora marveled at how delicate adjustments, tiny movements, and patient attention transformed the wheel from a dormant object into something almost alive. The hum beneath it was steady now, a soft, reassuring vibration, as if the wheel were breathing again. Once the wheel was stabilized, Tavin led Leora to inspect the granary floor. Small wooden tracks, long forgotten, ran along its width. Dust and debris had settled into them, but faint grooves revealed their purpose, guiding the wheel along a route to move sacks of grain. Leora traced the tracks with her fingers, noting slight warping and unevenness caused by years of neglect. Tavin handed her a small brush and cloth. "Prepare the path," he instructed. "The wheel cannot fulfill its purpose if the ground beneath it is unsteady." She worked carefully, brushing away debris and polishing the tracks with wax, ensuring the wheel would roll smoothly when the time came. The sunlight through the gaps in the granary walls illuminated faint patterns on the floor, traces of old grain, scratches from handles, and the soft imprint of countless footsteps. Leora noticed each detail, moving slowly, deliberately, letting her hands follow the rhythm of the place. After the floor was prepared, Tavin showed her how to adjust the wheel's alignment. They lifted it slightly and shifted it along the tracks, testing the balance and motion. The wheel responded to their hands, turning smoothly with only the faintest resistance from friction and time. Leora felt a thrill of quiet satisfaction, not from accomplishment, but from understanding the delicate relationship between wheel, floor, and the unseen rhythm of labor that had been embedded over decades. Tavin encouraged her to move the wheel along the length of the granary. She pushed gently, feeling the hum beneath her hands and the subtle vibrations through the floor. The wheel rolled smoothly, guided by the carefully prepared tracks. Leora paused at intervals, brushing dust from the floor and smoothing rough spots, ensuring the wheel's path remained unimpeded. Each motion, each adjustment, was an act of attentive care, reinforcing the connection between object, environment, and history. Hours passed in a quiet, meditative rhythm. Leora pushed, tested, and polished. Tavin guided, corrected, and advised. The wheel's hum shifted subtly as it moved, a delicate, steady vibration responding to careful hands. Leora realized that the wheel's purpose was not only to roll, but to teach, to reveal the consequences of attentive labor and patient observation. By mid-afternoon, they had moved the wheel along the full length of the granary tracks. The hum beneath it was steady and clear, the rim balanced, the spokes reinforced, and the floor prepared for ongoing use. Leora knelt beside it, touching the smooth, polished wood, feeling the vibrations and the subtle warmth left by sunlight and care. Tavin crouched beside her, his hand resting lightly on the wheel's rim. "It is ready," he whispered, "not only to move grain, but to carry the memory of all who used it before. And now you have learned to listen to it." Leora felt a deep, calm satisfaction, understanding that restoration was more than physical repair. It was the careful alignment of attention, presence, and observation. The wheel's hum was a reminder of patience, history, and the quiet rhythm of labor repeated over decades. She traced the rim with her fingers, appreciating every groove, every dent, every faint stain as a testament to endurance and use. After a pause, Tavin guided her to the granary door, leading to the first hidden channel beyond the wheel. Dust and debris had settled in the narrow passage, but faint marks revealed its original purpose, a small water channel designed to feed grain processing mechanisms and maintain moisture in the storeroom. Leora stepped carefully, lamp held high, and began clearing the passage with soft brushes. Each movement revealed patterns in the stone and clay, grooves, small divots, and tiny splashes of old mineral deposits. The channel was narrow, only a span of a hand in width, and the water murmur was faint but steady. Leora paused frequently, observing the subtle shifts of vibration through the floor and walls. Tavin crouched beside her, whispering guidance on how to clear debris without disturbing the delicate clay lining. Each action was deliberate, measured, and full of attention. As the day progressed, they worked together, clearing the passage, reinforcing weak spots with wax, and aligning small wooden gates within the channel. Leora noticed how the faint hum of water traveled along the walls, amplifying subtly in hollow sections and softening in tight curves. She realized that the channel was not merely a functional structure, but a subtle recorder of movement, an acoustic memory of decades of use. By late afternoon, the first section of the channel was fully restored. The hum of water beneath it traveled freely, clear and steady. Leora and Tavin tested the wheel once more, rolling it slowly along the tracks in the granary. It moved with ease, its hum mingling with the sound of flowing water from the channel. The combination was almost musical, a gentle rhythm that filled the granary with quiet life. Tavin nodded approvingly. Tomorrow, we extend our work to the secondary channel that runs to the upper storage loft. The wheel is prepared, the first channel is clear, and the hum is steady. But the route is longer, and each section requires patient hands and careful observation. Leora felt a sense of calm fulfillment. The wheel, the granary floor, and the channel were no longer forgotten. Each spoke, each groove, each subtle vibration told a story of labor, history, and attentive care. The work was not finished, but the rhythm had been restored, and the objects themselves seemed to recognize the respect and patience that had been given. As they descended the granary steps for the evening, sunlight spilled through cracks in the roof, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. The wheel rested quietly against the wall, its hum steady, and the channel carried the faint sound of water as if breathing along the stone floor. Leora held the lamp carefully and walked beside Tavin, feeling the gentle cadence of their work echoing in her chest. By the time they emerged into the courtyard, the village of Lumia was settling into evening. Women called softly to one another from rooftops. Children laughed in distant lanes, and the faint scent of bread and herbs drifted through the air. The clay water jar caught the last rays of the sun, its surface smooth and familiar. Leora placed her hand lightly on it, feeling the faint vibration from the wheel's hum travel through the wall. Tavin rested his hand on her shoulder. "The work of restoration is ongoing," he said. "Each step, each channel, each object responds to care. You have learned the rhythm. Tomorrow, we continue. But tonight, leave it to rest. Let the wheel, the channel, and the hum speak for themselves." Leora nodded, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. The hum beneath the wheel continued, steady and patient, a gentle reminder of history, attention, and enduring presence. She understood, more deeply than before, that discovery and restoration were acts of mindfulness, patience, and deliberate observation. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, the courtyard settled into calm. The wheel rested quietly against the granary, the channel carried water's soft murmur, and the hum beneath the wood and stone persisted, steady, patient, and alive. Leora and Tavin moved slowly through the evening lanes, carrying the rhythm of attentive work with them, ready for the next stage of restoration, and ready to listen carefully to what the forgotten places still wished to tell. The morning air in Lumia carried the faint aroma of baked bread and damp stone as Leora arrived at the courtyard. The wooden wheel rested against the granary wall, its hum steady and low, a subtle vibration that traveled through the floor and into the soles of her feet. She carried the lamp, brushes, wax, and cord, each item packed carefully into her satchel. Tavin followed slowly, leaning on his cane, his presence calm, deliberate, and reassuring. Today, he said softly, we follow the wheel to the secondary channel. The upper storage loft awaits, and the route connecting the wheel to it has been silent for many years. We must move with care and patience. Leora nodded. She knelt beside the wheel first, brushing dust from its rim and spokes. The hum beneath it was steady, almost conversational, as if acknowledging her attention. She pressed her fingers gently along each spoke, feeling the subtle vibrations and the delicate give of aged wood. Tavin crouched beside her, guiding her hands where the spokes were weak or splintered. The wheel was no longer simply an object. It was a teacher, a record of labor, and a guide to the hidden route above. Once the wheel was aligned along the tracks in the granary, they approached the narrow passage leading to the secondary channel. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of old stone, damp clay, and a faint trace of moss. The channel itself was narrow and partially obscured by dust and debris, but faint grooves and impressions revealed its former use. Leora knelt, lamp in hand, and began brushing carefully, clearing dust without disturbing the delicate clay lining. Tavin pointed to faint marks along the walls. See these notches? They are guides, reminders from hands long gone. They tell where the water turns, where the channel narrows, where careful attention is needed. Observe, do not rush, and respond with care. Hours passed as Leora and Tavin worked methodically along the secondary channel. Each bend revealed small obstacles, a displaced tile, a tiny accumulation of grit, a crack in the plaster lining. Leora addressed each with care, brushing, smoothing wax, and gently reinforcing weak spots. The channel carried the faint murmur of water, traveling along the hidden clay pipe, a living rhythm that guided her movements and rewarded attention. As they progressed, the channel widened slightly near the center of the granary. Here, remnants of old wooden sluices remained, partially rotted, but still intact enough to indicate their function. Leora studied them carefully, brushing dust from their surfaces and noting where the wood had shifted over time. Tavin showed her how to adjust the sluices gently, aligning them so water could flow freely when restored. The hum of the wheel below seemed to respond, vibrating slightly more intensely, as if approving the meticulous work above. The upper loft was still a considerable distance away. The passage climbed gradually, the ceiling lowering in some places, forcing them to bow slightly. Leora adjusted her lamp, ensuring light fell across each step and along the channel. She noticed the small notches carved into the stone steps, subtle guides for careful footing. Each step, each mark, each curve required her full attention. Tavin followed at her side, his voice a soft guide, patience, observation, care. The route remembers what is done carefully. They paused at a narrow bend where the channel shifted sharply. Dust had accumulated, forming small ridges along the clay walls. Leora swept carefully, revealing a faint groove that led to a hidden drain. She realized that the channel had been designed not only to carry water, but to regulate its flow, preserving the integrity of the granary and loft above. Tavin nodded approvingly. Notice how the design guides use without force. We must continue in the same spirit. Beyond the bend, the channel ascended into a small chamber. Leora paused, placing the lamp carefully on a shelf to illuminate the space. She observed the remnants of old wooden scaffolding, now dry and fragile, and small hooks along the walls where grain bags had once been secured. The faint murmur of water traveled through the channel, filling the chamber with a gentle, steady rhythm. Hours passed in careful labor. Leora brushed, polished, and reinforced. Tavin guided when needed, adjusting the lamp, suggesting subtle corrections, and occasionally pausing to let Leora observe the hum of the channel herself. The work was slow, deliberate, and immersive. The hidden channel, like the wheel and granary, responded to careful attention, its hum steadying as each obstruction was addressed. By late afternoon, the secondary channel was clear and reinforced. The water's murmur traveled smoothly along the clay pipe, connecting the wheel and the granary to the loft above. Leora tested the wheel once more, rolling it along the tracks to ensure its movement remained unhindered. The hum beneath it blended with the channel's soft murmur, creating a harmonious, steady rhythm. Tavin guided her to the upper loft. The entrance was small, framed by worn timber and stone. Leora climbed carefully, holding the lamp high. The loft had been empty for decades, its wooden floorboards covered in a thin layer of dust. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating the patterns of old grain, scratches from past labor, and small indentations where sacks had rested. Leora moved slowly, brushing dust from key areas and inspecting the floor for weak spots. The loft contained remnants of old storage racks and platforms where sacks of grain had been stacked. Leora traced the marks of the past carefully, noting areas that required gentle reinforcement. Tavin instructed her on subtle adjustments, placing small wooden wedges, securing loose boards, and ensuring that the floor could bear weight without risk. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and full of attention. As they worked, Leora realized that the loft, the channel, and the wheel were all part of a connected system, a hidden route that had endured decades of neglect. Each component responded to careful, deliberate attention. The wheel hummed steadily, the channel carried water's murmur clearly, and the loft absorbed their careful movements without complaint. By evening, the main sections of the hidden route had been prepared. Leora stepped back, allowing herself a moment to observe the wheel, the channel, and the loft. The hum of the wheel was steady. The water's murmur traveled smoothly along the clay pipe, and the loft's floorboards held firm. The system, though old, was responsive, alive with the memory of past use and the care of present hands. Tavin rested his hand on her shoulder. Tomorrow, we complete the final adjustments. We will ensure the route flows perfectly from wheel to loft. But for tonight, leave it to rest. Let the wheel, the channel, and the loft acknowledge the care given. Leora nodded, feeling the calm weight of his words. The hum beneath the wheel, the murmur of the water, and the quiet presence of the loft created a sense of steady completion. She understood that restoration was not a single act, but a series of deliberate, attentive gestures. Each moment spent observing, brushing, or reinforcing contributed to the rhythm of renewal, and each step connected her to the history embedded in the wood, clay, and stone. The village outside settled into evening. Children's laughter drifted from distant lanes. Women called softly to one another, and the scent of evening meals mixed with the faint aroma of herbs drying on rooftops. The wheel rested against the granary wall, its hum steady and alive. Leora placed her hand gently on it, feeling the vibrations travel through the floor and into her fingers. The hidden route, though not yet complete, was alive with memory, attention, and the promise of continued use. As they descended the granary steps for the evening, Leora carried the quiet satisfaction of careful work. The courtyard, the wheel, and the hidden channel awaited the next day's labor, patient and unhurried. The hum beneath the wheel was steady, the water's murmur persistent, and the loft above rested quietly, absorbing the attentive gestures of hands that respected its history. Tavin's voice, soft but firm, reminded her as they walked through the courtyard, restoration is ongoing. Every careful movement, every observed detail, strengthens the connection between past and present. Patience and presence are as important as hands and tools. Leora nodded, understanding fully. The wheel, the channel, and the loft were not simply structures to repair. They were living lessons in observation, care, and the slow rhythm of attentive labor. The hum beneath the wheel, the water's murmur, and the quiet air of the loft were all part of a continuous dialogue, a conversation between history, memory, and present hands willing to listen. When she lay down that night, the hum of the wheel lingered in her ears, steady, patient, and full of life. She closed her eyes, carrying the rhythm of careful restoration, the calm of attentive work, and the knowledge that tomorrow would continue the quiet, deliberate revival of the hidden route, the wheel, and the loft. The morning light in Lumea filtered softly through the narrow lanes and filled the courtyard with a gentle warmth. Leora arrived first, carrying the lamp, brushes, wax, and cord, each carefully packed and ready for the day's work. The wooden wheel rested against the granary wall, its hum steady and patient, a quiet vibration that seemed to acknowledge her presence. She knelt beside it, brushing dust lightly from the rim and spokes, feeling the subtle pulse beneath her fingers. Tavin followed slowly, leaning on his cane, his eyes calm and watchful. Today, he said softly, we extend the route fully to the loft. Each connection matters. Every step, every channel, Every minor detail must be attended to. We move slowly, with observation first and action second. Leora nodded. She began by checking the wheel's alignment on the granary floor. The tracks were clear from previous day's work, but she traced them with her fingers, brushing away any remaining dust and ensuring that every groove was free of debris. The hum beneath the wheel shifted slightly as she adjusted it, confirming the balance was steady. Tavin crouched beside her, showing her the subtle ways to feel shifts in the rim and tension in the spokes. Each motion was deliberate and careful. Once the wheel was prepared, they turned their attention to the hidden channel leading to the loft. Leora placed the lamp on a step beside the channel, illuminating the faint grooves in clay walls. Dust and tiny bits of debris had accumulated overnight. She began clearing them with the softest brush, following the subtle curve of the clay pipe as it rose toward the loft. The hum of the wheel below merged with the faint murmur of water traveling through the channel, creating a gentle, steady rhythm that guided her hands. The first bend in the channel required particular care. A small piece of plaster had loosened, partially blocking the clay conduit. Leora brushed it gently, using a bit of wax to stabilize the weak section. The water's murmur became clearer, traveling smoothly along the path. Tavin nodded in approval. Patience, observation, attention. Each adjustment must respect what has endured. They continued upward. The stair beneath the channel became slightly steeper, the ceiling lowering in places. Leora bent carefully, ensuring the lamp's light illuminated each step and each portion of the channel. She noticed faint notches and scratches along the clay lining, remnants of previous labor, guiding her movements. Each subtle mark informed her next brushstroke. Each groove indicated the proper alignment for reinforcement. Halfway to the loft, they reached a junction where the secondary channel split into two smaller conduits. One led to a narrow hatch that opened into a storage nook, and the other continued toward the loft. Leora examined both carefully. The smaller conduit contained more debris and minor cracks in the plaster lining. She applied wax sparingly, smoothing the surface without forcing the material, allowing the channel to respond to her touch. Tavin guided her hands when necessary, showing her how to press gently along the curves to maintain the integrity of the clay. Hours passed in quiet rhythm. Leora moved steadily, clearing dust, smoothing plaster, and polishing tiles along the channel. She checked the wheel frequently, rolling it along the granary tracks to ensure alignment and steady hum. The hum merged seamlessly with the water's murmur, creating a harmonious rhythm that filled the granary with quiet life. The loft above remained unseen but present, a destination waiting patiently for careful hands. At one particularly narrow bend, Leora paused. The clay walls of the channel were cracked slightly, and the water murmur sounded uneven. She applied wax carefully, pressing it along the curve with her fingers. The channel responded almost immediately, the water's murmur smoothing, steady and deliberate once more. She smiled faintly, realizing that attention and patience could revive even long-neglected structures. Tavin pointed to a series of faint scratches along the floor near the junction. Marks from hands and feet, he said softly. Each notch tells a story. Follow them carefully. They show how to navigate the space without disturbing what is already balanced. Leora traced each notch with her fingers, letting the subtle cues guide her movements. She felt the weight of history beneath her hands, the accumulated knowledge of those who had built and used the route long ago. By midday, the main channel was fully clear and reinforced. The wheel was aligned, its hum steady, and the clay conduit carried the water's murmur smoothly toward the loft. Leora paused to rest, placing the lamp on a nearby step. The granary seemed alive with memory and presence. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, tracing the patterns of labor long past. The faint traces of old grain and scratches along the floor spoke of countless hands and feet that had followed the same paths. After a short rest, they continued toward the loft. The steps became steeper and narrower, requiring careful placement of hands and feet. Leora held the lamp high, illuminating the upper portion of the stair and the final stretch of the channel. Tavin moved slowly beside her, adjusting his pace to match hers, a calm anchor guiding her movements. They reached the final hatch leading to the loft. The hinges were stiff, but intact. Leora tied a cord to the handle, creating a secure loop for lifting. She applied wax to minor cracks along the frame, ensuring the hatch could be opened smoothly without disturbing the surrounding wood. The hum of the wheel below and the water's murmur in the channel seemed to respond, steadying and harmonizing. Tavin gestured to the loft above. "We open it slowly," he said. "Observe first, then enter. Let the space reveal itself gently. The loft holds memory, purpose, and patience. Approach with respect." Leora lifted the hatch carefully, the small hinge groaning softly as it moved. Beyond it lay the loft, bathed in soft sunlight filtering through gaps in the roof. Dust and debris had settled on the floor, but the faint marks of old storage racks, platforms, and foot traffic were visible. Leora held the lamp high, illuminating the space without disturbing its delicate balance. The loft smelled faintly of straw, clay, and the warmth of the sun. Leora stepped inside slowly, brushing dust from key areas and inspecting the floorboards for weak spots. The wheel's hum below and the water's murmur from the channel filled the space, creating a gentle, steady rhythm that connected the granary, the wheel, the channel, and the loft. Tavin guided her hands as she began reinforcing weak boards with small wedges, polishing surfaces with wax, and aligning platforms for stability. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and full of attention. The hum and murmur seemed to settle around her, as if approving the careful work. Hours passed. In a quiet, immersive rhythm, Leora adjusted floorboards, polished tiles, and ensured that the channel continued to carry water smoothly. She moved deliberately, testing the wheel, listening to the hum, and following subtle cues in the loft. The space gradually responded to her attention, steadying, harmonizing, and regaining its latent purpose. By late afternoon, the loft and the full hidden route were largely restored. The wheel moved freely along the granary tracks. The secondary channel carried water's murmur clearly, and the loft floorboards held steady. Leora stepped back to observe the space as a whole. The hum of the wheel and the water's murmur blended into a quiet, harmonious rhythm. The granary, the hidden channel, and the loft seemed to acknowledge the patient attention given. Tavin placed a hand on her shoulder. "The route is nearly complete." Tomorrow we finalize the last adjustments, ensure the channel flows perfectly, and the wheel's movement is steady throughout. But for now, rest. Let the spaces absorb your care. Leora nodded. She felt a deep calm settle over her. The wheel, channel, and loft were no longer forgotten. They had been restored with careful hands and patient observation. Each element, wood, clay, tile, and water, responded to attention and respect. She understood, more fully than ever, that restoration was not merely physical work, but a dialogue with memory, purpose, and enduring presence. They descended the granary steps slowly, the sunlight filtering through the cracks in the roof and highlighting dust motes that danced in the air. The wheel rested quietly against the wall, its hum steady. The channel carried the faint murmur of water along the clay pipe, and the loft above awaited the final adjustments. As they emerged into the courtyard, the village had settled into early evening. The clay water jar rested in its familiar place, round and plain, yet alive with connection to the wheel and hidden root. Leora placed a hand lightly on it, feeling the subtle vibration from the hum beneath the wheel and the murmur of the channel. Tavin spoke softly. Tomorrow, we finish. The root will flow fully, and each part, the wheel, the channel, the loft, will carry its purpose once more. You have learned to listen, to observe, and to move with care. That is the lesson these hidden roots teach. Leora nodded, understanding completely. The wheel, the hidden channel, and the loft had become more than objects. They were teachers of patience, attention, and quiet labor. The hum of the wheel and the murmur of the water carried a steady, gentle rhythm that would continue, guiding hands willing to follow carefully, slowly, and deliberately. The next morning, the courtyard was quiet, bathed in soft sunlight that warmed the stones and the wooden wheel resting against the granary wall. Leora arrived first, carrying her lamp, brushes, wax, and cord. The faint hum beneath the wheel welcomed her, steady and patient, a gentle vibration that traveled through the floor and into her fingertips. She knelt beside it, brushing dust from the rim and spokes, feeling the familiar pulse of the wood. Tadin followed slowly, leaning on his cane, his presence calm, deliberate, and reassuring. Today, he said softly, we complete the hidden route. The loft is prepared, the channel cleared, and the wheel steady. But the final adjustments require patience, observation, and care. Each movement matters. Leora nodded. She began by rolling the wheel gently along the granary tracks, testing its alignment and balance. The hum beneath it was steady, a clear, deliberate vibration that confirmed the wheel was ready for the final connection to the loft. Tavin crouched beside her, pointing out subtle shifts in the rim and spoke tension, teaching her how to sense where minor adjustments were necessary. Every movement was measured, every touch deliberate, and every vibration meaningful. Once the wheel was aligned, they turned their attention to the upper channel. Leora carried the lamp along the clay conduit, illuminating every curve, bend, and notch. Dust and tiny debris had accumulated, though lightly, and she brushed carefully, revealing faint markings etched into the clay walls. The water's murmur traveled steadily along the pipe, responding to her touch as she reinforced weak sections with wax. Tavin guided her hands when necessary, showing how to smooth cracks and align the channel so that water could flow without obstruction. Hours passed in steady rhythm. Each bend and turn of the channel required attention. Leora observed subtle changes in the hum and murmur, adjusting the wax and smoothing the clay. At one particularly narrow bend, the plaster had shifted slightly, causing the water's murmur to falter. She pressed gently, adjusting the clay and reinforcing the edges. The sound straightened immediately, flowing smoothly once more. Tavin nodded approvingly. "The stare of water is restored when attention meets patience," he said. They moved to the final section of the channel leading directly into the loft. Leora brushed away accumulated dust, polished tiles along the floor, and reinforced small cracks in the plaster lining. She paused frequently, listening to the water's murmur, feeling the vibration through the walls, and observing the wheels hum below. Each subtle cue guided her hands, teaching her the delicate rhythm of restoration. The loft itself awaited, bathed in soft sunlight through the gaps in the roof. Dust covered the floor, and remnants of old storage racks lay scattered. Leora entered carefully, lamp in hand, brushing surfaces gently and inspecting floorboards for weak spots. Tavin followed, offering guidance and observing silently. The wheels hum below, and the channel's water murmur created a harmonious rhythm, connecting the granary, the wheel, the channel, and the loft into a continuous, living system. Leora began reinforcing weak floorboards with small wooden wedges, aligning the loft's platforms, and polishing surfaces with wax. She moved deliberately, step by step, aware of every vibration, every subtle shift in the materials. The loft responded to her careful hands, settling into a calm stability. Tavin guided when needed, adjusting the lamp, suggesting minor corrections, and allowing Leora to observe the system's response herself. By mid-afternoon, the loft, channel, and wheel were fully integrated. The hum of the wheel beneath the granary was steady, the water's murmur traveled freely along the clay channel, and the loft floorboards were firm and secure. Leora stepped back, observing the space as a whole. Everything was aligned, steady, and alive, with quiet memory and purpose. Tavin placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well," he said softly. "The wheel, the channel, and the loft are restored. They carry not only grain and water, but memory, attention, and care. Your hands have returned their purpose, and your mind has learned the rhythm of attentive work." Leora felt a deep calm settle over her. The hidden root, once forgotten and silent, now hummed with steady life. The wheel moved freely, the channel carried water clearly, and the loft stood ready to serve. She understood that restoration was more than repair. It was a dialogue with history, memory, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of attentive hands. They paused in the loft, listening to the combined sound of the wheel's hum and the water's murmur. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, highlighting the textures of wood, clay, and stone. Leora traced a finger along the edge of the channel, feeling the subtle vibration beneath her fingertips. She realized that each movement, each careful touch, had restored not only the physical structure, but also the continuity of purpose, history, and presence embedded in the space. Hours passed in quiet observation. Leora and Tavin checked every connection: the wheel, the tracks, the channel, and the loft floor. Each adjustment was subtle, deliberate, and careful. The hum beneath the wheel and the water's murmur in the channel blended into a steady, harmonious rhythm, a living testament to the power of attention and patience. As evening approached, the sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the granary floor. Leora replaced the lamp carefully, allowing its soft glow to illuminate the wheel and channel without disturbing the restored alignment. The loft above was calm, steady, and ready. The wheel hummed quietly, the water traveled smoothly, and the entire route seemed to exhale, acknowledging the patient care it had received. They descended slowly from the loft, the gentle cadence of their steps matching the rhythm of the restored system. Outside, the courtyard was bathed in soft evening light. The clay water jar rested in its familiar place, round and smooth, its blue cord loose around its neck. Leora placed a hand gently on it, feeling the vibrations from the wheel and channel travel through the wall and into her fingers. The hidden root, once forgotten, now carried purpose, memory, and life. Tavin rested his hand on her shoulder. "Restoration is complete," he said. "But remember, attention, care, and patience are ongoing. The root, the wheel, and the loft will continue to teach those willing to listen." Leora nodded, feeling a profound calm and quiet satisfaction. The wheel, channel, and loft had been restored, but more importantly, she had learned the rhythm of careful work, observation, and attentive care. She understood the enduring value of patience and presence, and the way deliberate action could revive forgotten places and memories. As the sun set over Lumia, casting golden light across the rooftops and streets, Leora and Tavin stood together in the courtyard. The wheel hummed steadily, the channel carried water's murmur clearly, and the loft above rested in calm readiness. The hidden root, once silent and forgotten, now thrummed with life, history, and purpose. Leora closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the warmth of the evening air, the faint scent of straw, wood, and clay, and the subtle rhythm of the restored system. She realized that the work they had done was more than physical restoration. It was the restoration of attention, memory, and connection. Each brushstroke, each careful movement, each moment of observation had contributed to the harmony of the space. When she finally stepped inside her home, Leora felt a deep satisfaction settle in her chest. The wheel, channel, and loft had been returned to usefulness. Their quiet hum and gentle water murmur a testament to patient, deliberate care. She knew that tomorrow, and many days after, the hidden route would continue to function, carrying its purpose and memory forward. And in the courtyard, the wooden wheel rested quietly against the granary wall, the hum steady and alive, a gentle reminder that patient hands, attentive eyes, and careful observation could restore not only objects, but the very rhythm of life that had been waiting beneath dust, silence, and years of neglect.